All right, we're just waiting on the jury. Anything on the record or off the record?
This is the trial of Hannah Gutierrez Reed, legal name Hannah Gutierrez, armourer on the currently unreleased western Rust, on the set of which a prop gun had been loaded with live rounds unbeknownst to both cast and crew. The firearm discharged whilst in the hand of Alec Baldwin, killing the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins and wounding the director, Joel Souza. Both star and armourer were charged with involuntary manslaughter.
The matter I'm calling is State of New Mexico versus Hannah Gutierrez, D101CR, 2023-40. Parties state their name.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jason Lewis and Karen Morrissey on behalf of the State of New Mexico.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jason Bowles, Carmela Cisneros, and Todd Bullion are here for Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who is present.
All right, thank you very much. All right, jurors, so I, first of all, thank you for your patience. As they say, accidents happen. So remember that Ms. Hannah Gutierrez is presumed innocent. The burden is on the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Most of the first day was taken up with opening statements and watching an on-set video which was not shared with the viewing public.
Officer, you read a report in this case, right?
Yes.
Would looking at your report refresh your recollection as to who was in the church?
Yes.
All right, I provided you a copy of your report. Let me know if that refreshes your recollection.
Yeah, I'm reading 12 different names, but
All right, who all was in the church?
I'm going to butcher these names, but Sergio Cinto, labeled as a chief lighting technician. Duran Curtin as a costume. Ross, I don't know how to say the last name, but I guess his title would be Dolly Grip. Mamie Mitchell, which script supervisor. Matthew Himmer, assistant chief lighting technician. Joseph Zelo, key rigging. David Halls, first assistant director. Reese Price, key grip. Thomas Gaddy, special effects coordinator. Roman Gaddy, special effects key. Lucas Hussack, special effects technician. And Alec Baldwin, actor.
Thanks.
As soon as we got to the movie set itself, it was chaos. There was people everywhere. Deputy LaFleur was already on scene. I didn't know where he was. And I was being directed to the makeshift church.
Two members of law enforcement were asked to recount the sights as they first stepped on set and reviewed body cam footage.
You're in charge, ma'am? I need to know where the gun's at right now.
Hannah Gutierrez is easily identifiable in the video by her dyed yellow and purple hair.
Oh my god, fuck. I'm so... Are they okay?
Hey, Santa Fe, we need more units out here.
I haven't been inside it.
Yesterday we were discussing a Mary Kay bag that was located in the prop truck. Do you recall that?
Yes.
So let's go ahead and continue there. I am showing you what we've marked as State's Exhibit 44A. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And what is this a photo of?
This is a close-up of what's inside that Mary Kay bag.
I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. What are these over here on the right?
Those are spent blank rounds.
Okay.
I believe there were additional rounds underneath those boxes.
Okay. And do you know what we're looking at here on the side?
This is the outside pocket of that Mary Kay bag.
Okay, and I'm sorry, this is State's Exhibit 45.
Day 2. A lot of time was dedicated to identifying the sorts of ammunition which were kept on set, as well as how and where they were stored.
This was a live round that was deconstructed by the FBI.
And where did this live round come from?
So this live round originated from the box that was handed to Lieutenant Benavides.
Okay, and that's the box that just has the one live round in it that we looked at the photo of?
Yes, with the silver primer.
The prosecution showed that the armourer's organisation of the bullets was something of a mess.
What is the scope of your training you've had on determining different types of ammunition?
I mean, are you specifically referring to
calibers, 44, 40, 38, 45. You've been trained on recognizing the differences?
That I have, yes.
Okay. And how about recognizing the differences between dummy rounds, blanks, and live rounds?
I have not been to that type of training, no.
Okay. So your testimony earlier when you were talking about the dummy rounds and the various measurements and that, you have not been trained in that area?
No.
Okay. Now, part of your training in terms of verifying that a round is either a dummy or a live round is you need to send that to the FBI lab for confirmation. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Because some of the dummy rounds appear like live rounds. They look like live rounds, correct?
Yes.
In fact, the round that came out of the box we saw earlier that did not shake, you sent that off to the FBI lab because you wanted to confirm what that was, correct?
Yes.
And part of the thing the FBI does is they take apart the round and they determine if it has powder in it. Is that right?
Yes.
And when they do that, that tells them basically if it's a live round or a dummy. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So would you also agree in your training that you've never been taught that you can eyeball a dummy and determine if it's a dummy or a live, or eyeball a round and determine if it's a dummy or live?
No, I've not been trained in that area.
Okay. And you would also agree with me that you can't look at a picture of a round and determine necessarily if it's a dummy or a live?
I would disagree with that.
And why would you disagree?
The rounds that have holes drilled into the side of them or the primers removed appear to visibly be dummy rounds.
And those do. Now, how about the rounds that don't shake, don't have a hole in them, and you're looking at that? You can't tell just by looking at it that's live or dummy, correct?
Correct.
And that's why you sent that one off to the lab again, right?
Yes.
Okay.
At any point in time, were you asked to do any work on the set of Rust?
Yes.
What work were you asked to do?
We were asked to, we were contracted to do duties of an EPK, which is stands for electronic press kit, which is something that a lot of productions have.
May I approach?
This videographer was hired by the Rust production to film behind-the-scene footage days before the shooting took place. The footage wasn't shown while he was on the stand, but would be seen several times during the trial.
That's fine.
All right, thank you.
Did you witness any scenes actually being shot when you were on set?
Yes.
Did those scenes involve Mr. Baldwin?
Yes.
All right. Did he seem to be in command of those scenes?
Objection. Foundation.
Judge, he said he saw it.
Overruled.
Okay.
Well, the one that sticks out, he wouldn't have been in command because I think that it seemed that he was on a horse and he was playing dead. So it wasn't really much of a...
Okay.
Oops. All right, is that better? We're going to go back through real quick some of those text threads that we had on the Elmo, and we're going to have you read the content, okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to place on the Elmo what was previously entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 96.
Sure. So this was a message that was received by Ms. Gutierrez-Reed's phone from the Dadkula contact that says, get someone to show her a single action gun and how it works. They don't go off by themselves. And then beneath that is an incoming message from Mr. Bowles' phone to Ms. Gutierrez-Reed's phone that says, yes, I sent her this manual I got today also.
They've already saw it.
Yes, so this is Exhibit 96. The first page I've just read. The second page,
And Mr. Hawks, what's the date of these conversations?
this is December 1st, 2021. The second page starts with a message from Mr. Bowles to Ms. Reed that says, I think I sent this with an attachment. Beneath that is an outgoing message from Ms. Reed that says, yeah, honestly, that gun won't go off unless he fully cocked it.
Alec Baldwin, the actor who was holding the gun at the time it went off, maintained that he did not pull the trigger.
So I want to ask you, did Ms. Gutierrez ever specifically request from you additional training time with Mr. Baldwin?
Not to me.
Did Ms. Gutierrez request generally additional training days as an armorer from you?
No, not from me.
This is Rust's unit production manager, who goes by the name Rowe.
Now, with regard to that set, I want to ask you, were you aware of the camera crew walking off?
Yes.
And they were disgruntled?
Yes.
When did they walk off that set?
I received resignation emails the night before.
Okay. So this was the night before the incident, the night before the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And these camera crew, and how many of them walked off?
My memory says 6, which was the full team.
So the full team, the full camera crew walked off set. So for the set next day, you have to get a new camera crew.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and were you in charge of that?
It was a joint effort between myself, my line producer, Gabrielle Pickle, and our producers as well.
Are you and Miss Pickle, do you talk, or on the set, did you talk quite a bit? Did you talk daily?
Yes.
Okay, so, and I don't want to get into hearsay comments, what somebody else said, but were you aware that Miss Gutierrez Reed had requested additional training of Mr. Baldwin?
For Mr. Baldwin, no.
Okay, you never had that discussion with her?
No.
But do you know whether Miss Pickle did?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay. So let's go back. You and a couple more people are trying to get the camera crew. Is that right? And did you get them for the next day?
We did.
Okay. You had to scramble. I mean, that night? Is that make calls that night?
Yeah, I was making calls that night and very early the next morning.
The camera crew that walked off because they were disgruntled, did they come to the set that next morning?
They did.
Do you know what they were doing the next morning? Did you watch them or did you see them?
Yeah, I was with them for part of the morning. They were retrieving their own personal effects off of the camera truck.
Okay. Did you see any of them walk around to other parts of set, or were they just getting their effects?
From what I remember, they were just around the truck.
Okay.
I think you indicated on cross-examination that no one complained to you about Ms. Gutierrez. Do you recall saying that?
I do recall.
Isn't it true that one of the reasons that the camera crew indicated they were leaving was because of the accidental discharges from firearms on set?
Correct.
I'm going to object.
Day 3 started with 4 experts taking the stand one by one. The first in firearms examination and firearms identification. He testified that he found the gun to be functioning to the manufacturer's specification and unlikely to have gone off by accident. The next expert was in latent fingerprint examination. She found 10 latent fingerprints on a box of shells. 2 of those prints belonged to Halyna Gutierrez. The others could not be identified, but Sarah Zachary, David Halls and Alec Baldwin were ruled out. The third expert was in chemical forensic examination. He examined 2 different sorts of ammunition used on set and found different propellant used within. The last expert was in forensic serology and DNA analysis. She could not confirm that Halyna Gutierrez's DNA was on the gun. Then the first member of the Rust crew came to the stand, Ross Adiego.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a dolly grip does?
I help the camera department in any way possible with camera support. So any camera movement, whether on a dolly, camera cranes, rigging a camera to vehicles, I assist them in any way that I can as a representative from the grip department.
Did you notice a difference then generally in terms of just the behavior, the general behavior on the movie set of the other armors you worked with as compared to Ms. Gutierrez?
Yes.
What was that?
She wasn't necessarily as serious or professional as I'm accustomed to with the other armors that I've worked with.
What do you mean? Give us an example.
I recall walking by her cart a number of times, and firearms and or bandoliers or ammo belts being left out on the cart unsecured. I don't know that I've ever seen an armor pull loose ammo out of a fanny pack. Typically, my experience with armors is any ammo they use, blanks or dummies, comes out of some sort of container, whether it's a labeled box or some other plastic type ammo container. So.
Now, in terms of, you indicated that you would see firearms and gun belts unattended on the cart. Why was that? Why did that stand out to you?
It was out of the ordinary. Again, my experience is most of the firearms I've seen on set come out of some sort of locked bag, locked container. Some armors, depending on the show, have a whole wheel around cart with drawers that they can lock. A drawer that potentially has the individual's actor's or character's name on that drawer. So that character's props would live in that drawer under lock and key.
Were the guns and gun belts laying out unattended on the prop cart, was that a safety concern for you?
Yes.
Why?
It seemed inappropriate and out of the ordinary that those firearms weren't secured.
And why is it concerning that the firearms aren't secured?
Well, I don't know that they're completely under the armorer's control if they're not under lock and key.
Mr. Adiego went into great detail about the role the armourer took on the previous films in which he worked, and how Halyna Gutierrez's work fell short of that.
Were you present for the filming of every scene that was filmed on the set of Rust during those 2 weeks?
I believe I was present for every scene, maybe not every take.
Do you recall being present on the set of Rust on a day where there were what I'm going to refer to as accidental discharges of guns?
Yes.
Can you describe the first accidental discharge that you recall happening?
I think the first one was I don't know if the prop master was loading or unloading.
And let me stop you. What's the prop master's name?
Sarah, I think her name was Sarah Zachary.
Okay.
Was her name. We were outside of the character Rust's cabin, and I don't know if she was loading or unloading a handgun, but unannounced to any of the crew, that firearm discharged. So we consider that a negligent discharge.
And how did you know it discharged?
I was within feet of it, and she seemed pretty spooked when I turned around, and it appeared as though she had shot that firearm at her foot.
Can you tell us, in your experience, in your opinion, what you think that gun was loaded with?
It made a bang, but it didn't, I don't know if there was a bullet or not, because I don't know if it hit her foot, but it certainly made a loud noise that spooked us and the animals we had on set. I think we had a couple of horses on set, and again, it was unannounced, so it was a surprise to everybody that was around.
Were you preparing to film a scene or a take at that time?
Yes.
Was it announced by anyone whether the guns were going to be loaded with dummies or blanks?
I don't think at that moment it had been, no.
Okay. And can you describe what the other accidental discharge was that happened?
So like I had stated, we were kind of outside the cabin we were using as Harlan Rust's cabin.
And I'm going to stop you real quick. Who's Harlan Rust?
Harlan Rust is the lead character in the movie, and that was played by Mr. Alec Baldwin.
Okay, please continue.
I believe it was Alec's stunt double, so somebody dressed up to look like Alec, was going to be firing either some sort of long gun. I don't remember if it was a lever action gun or a shotgun, something out of the window of the cabin towards, I think it was the law enforcement that were chasing him, that were starting to catch up with him. There was supposed to be a gun, some gunfire, and I believe that Hannah was prepping the stunt double in the cabin with that firearm, and again, unannounced to any of us outside the cabin, that firearm was discharged.
And if you can estimate, how much time passed between the first of these accidental discharges and the second?
My recollection is they were within an hour of one another.
And in your experience on other movies with armorers, are accidental discharges common?
No.
Have you ever experienced an accidental discharge on another movie?
I don't know that I have.
Did the accidental discharges that you described cause you concern?
Yes.
Did you articulate that concern to anyone on set?
I did.
Who?
Both the first AD and his second in command on set, the second AD.
And when you say the first AD, who are you referring to?
Dave Halls.
And what did you say to Mr. Halls?
I don't recall my exact words to Mr. Hall, but I expressed my frustration and anger with the fact that safety seemed to be secondary to the production clock.
And without saying what Mr. Halls said, was Mr. Halls responsive to your concerns?
Mr. Halls ignored me and walked away.
The morning of October 21st, 2021, were you working on set that day?
I was.
For those not in the know, that was the day the shooting took place.
And when you arrived on set, did anything unusual happen?
Yes.
What was that?
The camera department had decided to leave the show due to safety concerns and some other concerns they had.
Mr. Adiego explained that the 6 members of crew who walked out on the production were replaced at short notice by 3 new, less seasoned members of crew. The reduced number meant that only 1 camera could be used at a time instead of the production's standard of 2. This caused concerns that the footage required could not be filmed in the time allotted.
The scene that was being filmed prior to the lunch hour that we're working up to showing, describe what this scene was supposed to be. What was your understanding of what was going to be filmed?
That Harlan Rust was going to be laying in wait in this church for the lawmen that he knew were pursuing him, and I think at this point in the story, rapidly catching up to him.
I'm sorry, with regard to firearms, what was your understanding about what, if any, firearms were going to be present and used during the filming of that scene?
What I understood was that we were going to finish the piece we started looking at, where it's the Harlan Rust's reaction to the lawmen coming in, and then we were going to film one more piece that we would refer to as an ECU, an extreme close-up, where you see Harlan Rust contemplating pulling his gun or not, kind of rubbing his hands, and then he starts to draw the firearm. My understanding is once we had that piece filmed, we were going to do what we would call a turnaround. So we'd then be filming from behind Harlan Rust, Alec Baldwin, seeing the I think it was 2 lawmen come into the church, and then the shootout would ensue from there.
So during the scene in the morning, was Mr. Baldwin armed with his prop gun?
Yes.
And what was your understanding about whether that was a real gun or a replica, meaning a rubber gun or plastic gun?
My understanding is Mr. Baldwin always wanted to use his, what we would refer to as his hero props. So I understood it to be a real cold gun at that point.
And when you say cold gun, explain to the jurors what you mean.
Cold gun would indicate that the armorer and potentially first AD had deemed that weapon safe to be used on set. Cold referring to the fact that the trigger could be pulled and nothing would happen.
Were you present in the church when Ms. Gutierrez brought the firearm into the church?
Yes.
And tell the jury what you saw and or heard.
I never saw the interaction between Hannah and Dave in the church, but I could hear Hannah telling Dave that the firearm had been checked before lunch and had been locked up during lunch, and then Dave called out cold gun or cold weapon. I heard the word cold, and that's when I went back to focusing on my task at hand, helping Reed and Halyna find that insert shot.
I am now going to play what will be marked as State's Exhibit 112A. I would ask the court to go ahead and admit 112A and give permission to publish.
Did you get up nice and slow? Toss any weapons you have.
One more. You good? Ready?
Set. Ready? And action. Harlan Russ. Did you get up nice and slow? Toss any weapons you have.
Well, how close can I get right there?
Joel, you want me to wait to give you that line till he lands?
It's okay.
Till camera lands?
Yeah.
Yep.
7 minutes, one.
Yeah.
Draw your gun and look up and point your gun, okay?
Okay, which way? Camera right or left?
This side of camera for now.
So camera left for now.
I'll stand right here for you, Alex.
So whip it out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me get this all greased and ready.
Yeah.
Okay, ready? Okay, ready? Ready.
And set. Ready, and action.
Harlan Russ.
So I think that we may have ended your description of what was going on in the after lunch session where Mr. Souza was standing. And were there other people in the church also?
Yes.
Do you know approximately how many people were in there?
Myself, Reed, the camera operator, Zach, the boom guy was.
When you say the boom guy, what is the boom?
Sorry, guys. Sound. The person holding the sound boom. So recording sound for the sound mixer was in the church. Joel was shoulder to shoulder, like I had described, looking at my monitor. I believe Mamie Mitchell was to his right. Wardrobe, a woman named Doran was in there, I think, looking over Mimi's shoulder at the monitor. Halyna, Serge, my direct boss, Reese Price, who's the key grip, he's the head of the grip department, had just come in to work with Halyna and Serge. Dave Halls, and maybe one of the effects guys, I recall, was kind of in and out, keeping an eye on things, because they had pre-rigged some of their effects stuff in the ceiling, again, in preparation for the big turnaround that we were about to do.
Okay.
So I didn't give you a number, but I think that works out to 12-ish.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So keep walking us through it. What happens next?
So we, I guess Reed and I are trying to find the camera angle that Joel, the director, is happy with, that he feels will tell that piece of the story. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I believe Halyna and Serge were discussing how to change the lighting for the turnaround. Reese, my boss, Reese Price, was in there. I think he had just brought in a bounce card, maybe for that insert, maybe for the next shot.
We don't know what a bounce card is.
Lighting apparatus. So he was going to use some of the light coming through one of the windows and potentially reflect that back towards Mr. Baldwin to help illuminate him. I think Joel the director, and Alec had some brief conversation back and forth about what the goal was for that shot, and I think Alec had drawn it once to kind of audition what he thought his action should be for Joel, and then he drew it again, and it went off, and instantly, I mean, a firearm went off in a small wooden church, so the concussion, ears ringing, that moment of panic in everybody. I think the first person I made eye contact with was Halyna, who was clearly injured by whatever that gunshot was, that noise we had just heard. And in fact, she was starting to go flush, and I think holding her right side, and then I think that Joel let out some sort of scream or made some noise that, to indicate he was also injured. And I think I just my attention went to Joel because he was the closest to me. I think I recall Reed and Serge moving Pew out of the way to help Halyna get to basically to lay Halyna down and start tending to her, figure out what her injuries were, or injury. And I started attending to Joel. I think I yelled out that if you can't help us, get the fuck out of here. And someone called 911. And I do recall Mimi's voice in the distance talking to 911 and telling where we're at. And I tried to calm Joel down. We had a good rapport, so I just tried to calm him down and let him know that we were going to get through it, because I didn't know what else to do in that moment.
Right after the gun went off, do you recall seeing Ms. Gutierrez in the church?
I do not.
And in terms of your attention to Mr. Souza, what were you doing to him? Were you touching his body? What were you doing?
I was. So Joel was wearing kind of a thick hoodie, and I believe he had a t-shirt or a couple shirts on underneath, so it was start to figure out where Joel had been injured. He was certainly at that point writhing in pain and concerned for himself, asking me how Halyna was, and I think, coming to the realization that he had been shot. So I was trying to find where he was wounded. So started pulling back his hoodie to reveal what appeared to be a circular wound in his right shoulder. And at that point, I think the sheriff and Matt came in. They had gloved hands. I didn't, so I had some of his blood on my hands. And I think I helped them roll Joel over. One of them had trauma shears to cut his shirt off, and then I helped roll him over, and I was in a position to see that what appeared to be a bullet just under the skin, basically where his right shoulder blade was, and he was in a great deal of pain. And I think that Cher gave me some gauze to just put some pressure on the wound while they attended to Halyna's injuries, which I gathered at that time were certainly much more severe because of her proximity to the firearm.
And could you hear Ms. Hutchins? I know you indicated that Mr. Souza was kind of yelling out in pain. Did you hear anything from Ms. Hutchins?
If I did, it was just, the groaning and discomfort from being shot by a firearm. I don't remember anything verbal from Halyna.
Okay. And at some point, did paramedics arrive?
Yes.
And if you know, at some point, was Ms. Hutchins taken for medical care offset?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I stayed with Joel until they carried him out, and what I observed was they were trying to stabilize her. I heard them call for a lifeline, so they were trying to stabilize her to get her in a helicopter and get her to whatever ER they felt was appropriate.
And at some point in time, were you notified that Ms. Hutchins had passed?
Yes.
Day 4 started with the doctor who performed Halyna Hutchins' autopsy confirming that she did not die of a pre-existing condition.
Death was caused by a gunshot wound in the chest.
And what was the manner of death?
I certified the manner of death as accident.
Next up was a member of the sheriff's office who had been asked to fix a rifle from the set of Rust, which had been loaded with ammunition of a wider gauge than the gun was designed for, and therefore jammed.
So the round that was actually in this gun, do you know if this was actually a dummy round that was inside?
I don't know.
Would there be any danger if it was a dummy round that was inside?
If it were if you're describing the two differences between a dummy round and say a blank.
Okay, but you didn't know one way or the other?
I did not.
It could have been a dummy round that was.
Could have been a dummy round, yes.
A digital forensics expert examined content from Hannah Gutierrez's phone.
The first message has the timestamp at the bottom right of October 23rd, 2021, 12:28 p.m. And it says, "Hey, comma, I might be coming to Albuquerque tonight and was wondering if I can get that stuff." The next message has a timestamp of October 23rd, 2021 at 5:09 p.m. And it says, "Becca, call me when you get a chance."
Your Honor, pursuant to our agreement with security in terms of firearms safety, Mr. Rice is going to provide Mr. Haig with a box that has a firearm in it.
That has been cleared.
Yes. I suspect Mr. Haig will clear it again.
It is cleared.
Sir, can you go ahead and state your full name for the record?
Lucian C. Haig, spelled H-A-A-G.
How do you spell your first name?
Lucien.
How are you currently employed?
I have my own consulting firm in Carefree, Arizona, Forensic Science Services.
Mr. Haig was recognized by the court as an expert in firearms examination and reconstruction. He also concluded that the gun Alec Baldwin was holding was unlikely to have gone off of its own accord.
So based on the experiment that we did with this gun back in August of 2023, even if the hammer of the gun was damaged on October 21st of 2021, would the trigger have to be pulled for the gun to fire?
Two things. Yes, the trigger would have to be depressed or pulled. The hammer would have to be at the full cock position, and it can't be damaged because it would do what we saw here, and what you just saw here would not fire the gun.
So hypothetically though, even if it were damaged on October 21st, the operator, that being Mr. Baldwin, would have had to have pulled the trigger.
If you could get the hammer to stay at the full cock position, that's the difficulty to overcome.
Which it doesn't want to do.
It will not do.
Okay. One final demonstration for us, if you would take your revolver out and come in front of the jurors. And you can stand right here so that you can speak into the microphone. So just for completeness, I would like for you to demonstrate to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, using this exemplar revolver, the position that what had to have happened on October 21st, in your opinion, for this gun to fire. Let's show them rather than give them a verbal description.
It had to have a normally functioning, undamaged hammer. The handler, in this case Mr. Baldwin, had to get it to this position. If he let go of the hammer, it would stay as you see it here. Pulling the trigger will fire it. Now you can do that as quickly as you cock it, or you can wait minutes, hours. But when you do that, if there's a live round in there, it's going to fire. The firing pin impression is going to have the full depth from this. And I've done it, if somehow I did this, I'm trying to let it down, and I let it slip, it either won't fire at all, or it makes a much shallower firing pin impression. I did that multiple times with the evidence gun and with the exemplars. I own several of these. My son owns several of them. So I could distinguish by the depth and the centering. This was a normal hammer fall from the full cock position.
So had the gun fired at a position less than full cock, lower than full cock, in between full and half or half and quarter, you would be able to tell that by the depth of the firing pin impression. Is that correct?
What I call a slip off. If you're trying to let the hammer down and you get about the halfway point and it slips, you also have to pull the trigger, by the way, it'll be a much shallower firing pin impression. It doesn't hit the strike, doesn't strike as hard. And from the quarter cock, if you're trying to put it in safety position and you lose control of it, again, you have to pull the trigger. It just makes an indentation in the primer, doesn't fire at all.
Alexandra Hancock was a detective at the Violent Crimes Department of the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office at the time of the shooting. It was her responsibility to interview several of the people who were on the scene when the accident took place.
What was the reason, or reasons rather, that you determined that conducting a search of PDQ props would be appropriate?
So throughout the investigation, we obviously had the unanswered question of where this live ammunition may have come from. During Hannah's secondary interview with me, I found that ammunition that was supplied to Rust actually came from 3 different sources. One of those sources...
And let's back up real quick before you get there. The interview that you did with Ms. Gutierrez on October 21st, 2021, did you have a conversation with her about who provided ammunition to the set?
Yes.
And who did she say provided ammunition?
Seth Kenny.
And then you conducted a follow-up interview with her in November.
Yes.
And that was when Mr. Bowles was there.
Correct.
And that's what you were going to start telling us about, right?
Yes.
Go ahead, proceed.
So in that secondary interview, Hannah had disclosed that there were actually 3 sources of ammunition that went onto the set of Rust. One of them, her original, being Seth Kenny from PDQ Arm and Prop. The second supplier was an individual named Billy Ray, and he was part of the business Spots and Props, I believe it is what it was. And then the third source of ammunition for Rust was herself.
How many boxes of dummy ammunition did Ms. Gutierrez tell you that she herself provided to the set of Rust?
So 1, and then she had stated that she had brought other dummies and ammunition in gun belts. And then subsequently after that, when I had gotten the statement from Thel had described that him and Seth Kenny had been training actors on another movie prior to this in another state, that they had used live ammunition. And so Thel had said that ammunition somehow came back to New Mexico and then, potentially gone back to PDQ, which is the reason that I used, along with Seth Kenny providing the fact that he did have live ammunition and use live ammunition on that set to draft that search warrant for PDQ.
I'm going to go through and I'm going to play some videos of your statements with Ms. Gutierrez at this time. And on October 21st, 2021, did you have a conversation with Ms. Gutierrez when she was still on set before she was taken to the police station?
Yeah, we had some brief discussion.
Okay.
The prosecution played nearly 4 hours of Detective Hancock's interactions with Halyna Gutierrez. Firstly, on the set of Rust.
I can't believe Alec Baldwin was holding the gun. That's so fucked.
What did Ms. Gutierrez say to you?
Her statement was, "I can't believe Alec Baldwin was holding the gun. That's so fucked."
While being accompanied to the restroom, Halyna Gutierrez reveals her experience in the position of armorer.
How long have you been working here? Just a month.
Just a month?
Yeah. I've just been doing this job for like 9 months now.
Okay. How old are you?
24. I'm like the only female armorer in the game, and I just fucked up my whole entire career.
Have you studied armory, or did you go to classes, or how did you get into it?
My dad's one of the best armorers in the entire world, and he trained me, and I'm a fucking failure. Let's hit it.
You ready?
The second video was Halyna Gutierrez's interview directly after the events which caused the death of Halyna Hutchins. She was read her Miranda rights and agreed to answer some questions without an attorney present.
So you check the gun, but do you check the blanks and the dummies as well?
I do check the dummies. I check all of them, and they all showed that they were not hot, I guess you could say.
How can you tell the difference on the ammo, on the dummy rounds, or the blanks, I'm sorry. How can you tell the difference from the blanks and live, real ammunition?
A little ring. Like there's a little ring in there. Just rings. It rattles. It's like a little rattle.
When it's a blank?
Yeah, and then also there's ones that I have with holes in the side to show that there's nothing in them.
Okay. So what are these ones? They're the rings?
Yeah, these ones were the rings. There was one, I think, with a hole. Yeah.
Initially, initially, Ms. Gutierrez told you that she shook all the dummy rounds, is that right?
Yes.
And then, upon further questioning, did Ms. Gutierrez tell you that, in fact, one of the rounds actually wouldn't have been a shaker, it had a hole in the side?
Correct, which wouldn't give any sort of audible noise if she shook it.
All right.
And you put the gun before going to lunch back in the safe?
Yes.
But the blanks and dummies were left on the cart?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you, when you got back, did they look moved or tampered with or touched when you got back from lunch?
They did not. No, nothing seemed out of the ordinary.
Okay.
Was the gun still in the safe after lunch?
Yeah.
Who pulled it out?
Sarah pulled it out and she handed it to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you watched her?
Yeah.
Were you inside when the incident occurred?
No, I was right outside by my, whatchamacallit, my, cart.
Okay. How close was it?
About 15, 20 feet from being inside.
Okay. What side of the building was done?
So the building, like the door is facing, I don't know my north and west.
Is it where the cross is?
Is that the main door?
So
our cars were?
Where the door, where they were like coming in and everything, that door, we were like right adjacent to that, to the left.
Okay. Could you see inside at all?
No, not really. No, I couldn't see inside.
What do you remember about?
Basically, I just we had a couple of, we had a popper pop last week. You know, the poppers are for special effects. Like one just went off randomly last week, so I was like, oh, it must be a popper. And I checked all of them myself. So I heard the shot, and Sarah was like, what was that? And I was like, must have been a popper. And I turned around, and then I heard them say medic emergency, and I was like, what the fuck? And then I checked in, and I looked, and I saw Alec on the ground, and I was like, oh, not Alec, Joel, and I was like, what the fuck, was it the gun? And Dave was like, yeah, it was the fucking gun. And so I was like, I walked in and I tried to see what was happening or where the gun was, to secure the weapons on the set. And I got yelled at, and I ran out, and Dave brought me the gun, and I opened the gun up, and one of the dummies somehow had been discharged.
And can you kind of explain a little bit more what you mean by that it was discharged?
So if I had a bullet, wait, I have some dummies. So, right, check these out. I wish it had just been one of these. Fuck. But see how these have the hole?
Okay.
And this one doesn't have a primer, right? And most of them, they have the primers, but the primers aren't hot. I've never had one with a hot primer before.
Okay.
So that seems pretty weird to me. But so basically this part, when a bullet shoots, the fire projects it, and this comes out, this little piece right here, this little nipple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so when I had checked the gun, this part, that was gone.
Are you aware of a time or know if something like that can be dysfunctional or?
I mean, overall, these are some weird, what we're dealing with are explosives. There's always a chance of safety to be compromised, and that's the issue, and that's what I'm supposed to watch out for on set, and yeah.
Okay. What did Ms. Gutierrez just say? What she's supposed to watch out for on set?
The ammunition, pretty much.
The final video of the day was recorded on November the 9th, 2021. Hannah Gutierrez's hair is now a natural brown colour and her attorney was present.
So as far as like the movie productions go, do they require you to have any certifications to work? And it can be like,
You know,
anything.
I'm not really sure entirely, just because most of the jobs I've gotten have just been like through word of mouth and everything, or like, you know, Seth works on getting them for me, or my dad gets them for me, or my dad got me on as his assistant the first time, you know, so I'm not really sure entirely what they are looking for. I know that they get a firearms license and everything, and a license for the area to shoot on and everything. But they usually get that. I don't even get that usually, so
Okay.
I'm not really sure in terms of what else. I know that Seth always tells me that I'm on his license to work with these weapons, and that's all I really know.
And that's kind of the same with Sarah, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Not really sure what that's ever meant. Seth always just says Hannah and Sarah are on my license.
Okay. But as far as like you go, there's no
No one really asks about much of that.
like you don't have to take safety classes in regards to anything with movie sets.
So that's the thing. I was actually just getting into the union, and with the union and everything, because on this set they hired me non-union. But normally with the unions, you take a safety course, you take a sexual harassment course, and you take a few different things. And I had like literally just gotten the paperwork and everything to get in that. And you need 30 union days on a union show before you can do that. And so I had 22 before this job. And so a lot of the days from this job were going to count towards that.
Okay.
But yeah, so I wasn't even able to get that. But for other than that, like the whole industry doesn't really require anything. It's mostly just California or union, and I wasn't union.
Okay. And so Rust wasn't like, you know, like I obviously have to have a cert to be a cop.
Yeah, no,
And
totally.
Take, like, you know, every year I got to take like driving courses and shooting courses and everything like that.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, no, Russ didn't really ask me anything about that. They kind of just conferred it all through Seth.
Okay. Who hired you for Rust?
I believe, I'm not really sure. Seth just texted me and he was like, you got the job, prop assistant, so-and-so. I sent him my resume and they, Sarah sent it in and I think Roe approved it. And yeah, so Sarah hired me, Roe approved it.
Okay. So it's not like a typical hiring process for a job where you have to go in and...
Yeah, no, there's no real interviews like any time in film. Film's a very weird industry.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth by all means. I think it's so weird how like secretive it is almost, you know, like it's really hard to get on anything unless you know somebody, and if you stop working for a while it's like almost hard to jump back in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really weird. You can't just like look up like film jobs in your area and then go and apply. That's not a thing. Yeah. I really wish it was kind of like that. That would probably, yeah, that'd be a lot better. But right now there's just such a media surge, especially that, you know, they're just kind of getting on anyone that they can bring really, because the media surge with all of these different like the networks and everything coming out with their own little internet things, it's making everything like boom right now like crazy.
Yeah. So again, who provides the ammo?
So as far as I'm concerned, me and Sarah, we went together and we picked up the ammunition and all the weapons and my leathers from Seth Kinney in Albuquerque at his shop. Yeah, we got 2 boxes of ammo, I'm pretty sure, that day. And then as we went on in the show, there were a couple of times that we needed more. So Sarah and I would text him, you know, that we needed more, and occasionally Sarah brought in more ammo from Seth.
Okay. Those 2 boxes that were originally supplied, were they blanks or dummies?
Originally supplied.
You said that you picked up 2 boxes of ammo.
Oh yeah, so I
Or
think there
you
were,
mean like boxes like the white boxes?
no, they
or
were like bigger boxes.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, no, a lot of them were, there wasn't a lot of dummies in those really much at all. There were some dummies, you know, like obscure dummies that we couldn't really get, like the 50-70 rounds, you know. I don't know if you're familiar with those. Those are big rounds. They go in the trap door. So we had some of those dummies with it. But in terms of 45 long Colt dummies, I don't think there was a lot of dummies in there. And so I asked Seth about it, and I said, hey, like, where's all the long Colt dummies? Because the 45, you know, 45 ammo is, like, different than 45 long Colt. So we didn't exactly, I couldn't find that. So he told me to check the dummies that I had from the last show because he got me those ones and everything. And so I went back through a bag that I had. This bag had like a bunch of loose dummies in it. And I went through and I checked all of them and I put them into 2 boxes. And so we had 2 boxes of 45 long Colt dummies that were mine from the last show originally.
Cage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had just brought those off of the old way and they were in my car for like 2 weeks. I jumped right off of the old way into this. I was barely home for like a week. So, yeah.
But he told you to check your supply.
Yeah.
And what you had to take it.
Yeah.
So he authorized you to bring.
He authorized me to bring, dummies.
Okay.
And then also there was one time where he didn't give us any eighth loads, and I had 1 box of eighth loads, and so I was like.
So, Corporal, just to be clear, what we've just heard, did Ms. Gutierrez tell you that she brought 2 boxes of dummies onto the set of Rust that she had left over from the old way?
Yes.
And did she also explain that they were loose in a bag in her car and they had been there for 2 weeks?
That's correct.
And did she explain that she took them out of the bag and put them in boxes?
Yes.
I'm gonna use my box of eighth loads, put it on the invoice, and I would have received money for that.
For blanks.
For blanks, yeah. Eighth load blanks.
Okay. Did you ever get recompensated for this?
No, I don't really plan on it, given the circumstances.
Day 5 opened with the prosecution playing the last hour or so of Hannah Gutierrez's interview from November the 9th, 2021. Then questioning was passed over to the defense.
In your direct testimony, do I understand that you said you did not do the prop truck warrant until the 27th because, and I'm still going, because you did not have information from Ms. Gutierrez-Reed about the prop truck?
If that's the statement that I made.
Okay, so you stated under oath just a little bit ago that the delay in the prop truck search warrant from the 21st to the 27th was because you didn't have information about the prop truck from Ms. Gutierrez-Reed, correct?
So I wasn't even the case agent at that time.
Okay, that wasn't my question. My question was, you just stated earlier in your testimony that you didn't have information about the prop truck from Ms. Gutierrez-Reed, correct?
Maybe that's what I said.
Okay, then I want to show you what I'm going to mark for identification as defendants O. And may I approach, Your Honor? Corporal, I'm going to show you what was marked as defendants O and ask you if you could review that and see if you identify it.
So your highlighted portion?
Just the document itself.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
Yes.
What is that?
So this is the search warrant that I wrote on October 27th to search the prop truck.
Your Honor, I'd move admission of defendants O.
I will have an obvious objection to pages and pages of inadmissible hearsay. Would you like to approach? Or?
Yes. During the cross-examination of this witness, the 2 lawyers started to sound like a bickering couple from a sitcom.
You also stated that you also made a statement that Ms. Gutierrez-Reed had unloaded that firearm, the Baldwin revolver, over the prop cart. You recall that statement?
Yes.
And in fact, you made that statement numerous times, as I recall. Do you recall making it at least once?
Yes, because that's what she had said in her first interview.
Can you point out to me, and I'm all ears if you can, because I didn't hear it. Can you point out the timestamp where she said that about loading it over the prop card?
I don't have the timestamp.
Okay. Do you recall Miss Gutierrez-Reed's exact words in that first interview about unloading that gun?
Verbatim, no.
Okay. If I played you a clip, would it refresh your memory?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, do you want me to turn this down?
Anybody going to look at what he's showing her?
Well, I'm happy to look at what he's showing. I'm happy to look at what he's showing, but I also think probably the better and more complete way of handling this is to review the transcript, and I think we have numerous copies of that. So, I'm not going to tell Mr. Bowles how to do his job, so show me what you're going to show her.
Well, I'm refreshing recollection.
I know, but
Sure,
show
and
us.
you show me what you're going to refresh with.
This is a clip, and so if you want to play the actual video that was entered, we can do that too.
Well, you have it. She's your witness now. You do what you want to do.
Okay, if you don't want to help us out, is that what you're saying? You don't want to play?
Mr. Bowles,
Yeah,
you
then I'll
have
play.
it. You have computers. She's your witness.
Okay, then I'll play. Your Honor, Chad's better
You're
at
going to
operating.
refresh her
I'll
memory.
I still don't know what he's going to play.
Okay, all right.
Wait a
I
second.
have no idea what
are you
he's
showing
doing.
her?
Yeah, I'm just
Wait,
gonna play
you're
her a
not
clip.
listening to me. What are you showing her?
I'm playing her a clip of that video that was entered into evidence.
Which one, the first one?
The first one.
So I
The
think
first clip,
I think
which
Miss-
took 50 minutes?
But it's just a short clip. It's like 20 seconds.
So he needs to show it to me. Can we just step in the
Yeah.
right
And
outside
then,
the
and then you
courtroom
don't want the
he can show
jury
it
to
me?
hear it again because you're refreshing her memory, not
It's already, Judge, it's entered into evidence. They
That's
can hear
not,
it.
that's not true. You're refreshing her memory.
No, but I could play it as if it's in evidence already. So
And play the exhibit.
they've heard it.
Gabrielle Pickle was the line producer on the movie Rust. She testified that the production had originally scheduled 5 days where an armourer would be present on set. That was increased to 7 days due to rescheduling, and by request of Halyna Hutchins, it was later increased to 10.
So out of 12 days of filming, you gave her 10 armorer days, correct?
I believe a couple of those were training days, which would have been right prior to shooting.
Okay. And did Ms. Gutierrez ask you for additional training days?
There was an incident where she requested training that would involve Brady, which was a minor who did not fire weapons in the movie, and I denied that for insurance purposes, but that was the only one that we denied.
Did Ms. Gutierrez tell you that she needed additional training time with Alec Baldwin?
Not phrased like that. Alec was, in the question around Brady, Alec was going to be present because their characters in the script were so often together, but it was specifically for Brady to learn, to learn. The request was not because Alec needed more time.
It was because Brady wanted to do some gun training.
Yes.
And you said no because of insurance reasons?
Yes.
And what went into that decision? What were the insurance concerns that you had?
We would have had to inform insurance, and then we would have had to pay a little bit more money just because the minor element.
Because he's a child.
Yes.
Right? Okay. At any point in time, did you express concerns to Ms. Gutierrez that she was leaving firearms unattended?
I did, in an email.
Did you suggest to Ms. Gutierrez a way of remedying the problem of leaving firearms unattended?
Yes.
What did you suggest?
Some type of logging system, check in, check out.
Did she respond to you?
She did respond via email.
And did she agree to a check-in, check-out log system?
No.
Why not, if she told you?
She said that it was too complicated to do in between scenes. And they had a system that they were working with, and I'm trying to recollect, that was end of day, I believe.
Okay.
Day 6, and we're now halfway through the trial. Brian W. Carpenter of 13 South Productions takes the stand. He is a filmmaking professional with armourer experience, and to my mind, some of the most interesting things said in this case were said by him.
Can the armorer stop filming because of safety issues?
Absolutely. You would hope that you don't get to that point because there's very few people that can call cut or just stop a movie in its tracks. There's 3 departments on a movie set that can cause the loss of life if not done properly. That's special effects, stunts, and armor services. Those 3 things are very important that safety be upheld to the highest level. And yes, if you find or see or find yourself in a position where something extremely unsafe is happening, you can call cut and stop the production.
Is the armorer working for the actor? And what I mean by that is, can the armorer tell the actor what to do and not to do when it comes to firearms and firearms safety?
The quick and straight answer is yes. The armor department falls under the prop master, and the prop master department falls under the art department by technicality, or technically I should say. That is the level of command and the chain of command on that. But at any given time, you can step outside of that chain of command and give instruction based off of what you're supposed to be doing, and that is safety and guidance therein.
In your career as an armorer, have you ever had experiences where you had to just take guns away from people on movie sets?
Yes.
And why would you ever have to do that?
It mostly happens, and all of the multitude of stunt performers are going to get upset at me saying this, but it's the truth. Stunt performers, I love them. We've trained so many, and our stunt performers can be seen on almost every action movie in the last 10 years, and I'm very proud of them. However, a stunt performer will quickly say that they can do just about anything if you ask them, from fly a jet to handle a lever-action rifle. On that note, sometimes you give weapons off to stunt performers and quickly realize that they are not handling them safely or properly, and at that point in time you step in and very politely and soft-handedly just walk over and say to the prop master or to whomever, take the weapon away and say, this person doesn't get a live weapon anymore, they get a replica or a dummy or nothing at all. And so yes, I've had to do that in the stunt world pretty more than frequently, I would say. For an actor, I've never had to take a weapon away. I've worked with actors who were not allowed to handle a weapon due to safety issues previously, but I've never had to personally take one away from an actor. I've corrected actors, but never had to take one away.
And in terms of correcting actors, what are the things that an armorer does on a movie set to correct an actor? I believe in the soft-handed approach, which is the best.
Observe until it's time to step in, and at that point of observation, step in and offer suggestions. And if those suggestions are not followed, then you get more serious and say, this isn't a suggestion any longer. This is a direct action. We need to do it this way.
In your experience, are film sets frequently rushed environments?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because in any movie, time is an exact equal to money. The more time you spend, the more money you spend. And that comes from even when they invite an actor to walk, you'll have a PA saying, our actor's walking 30 seconds. I mean, it gets down to the seconds, literally, on a film. So the more time you don't have your things in order, or you're not prepared to actually get what they say, things in front of camera and on camera, the more money you're spending. So any delay of any sort is an expense to the production and to the producers or studio.
Can that rushed atmosphere have an effect on the armorer?
Yes.
And talk to us about the effect that it can have, and in your experience, what the armorer's responsibilities are.
Well, I can say this, and this is something that I was also with my one of our very good mentors always told me. He said, if you're being rushed, that's the time to slow down twice as much. And so that's generally the rule of thumb. If the production is rushing you and they're pushing you, which they do, then at that point in time you need to stop, take a beat, take a breath, and slow down twice as much as you were before, because that means you're getting into an atmosphere of unsafe behavior, and you're getting into something where you may miss something or have a misstep or overlook something, and that is not a place to be when you're in charge of safety.
In your experience, do actors generally do their own safety checks of the weapon? And what I mean by that is the actor is manipulating the gun, taking the ammunition in and out, looking at it.
You know, I've worked with a few actors that wanted to check their own weapons even after my safety checks occurred, just because they felt more comfortable doing that. As long as I was there standing and observing and letting them do that, as long as my safety checks occurred, they can do as many more safety checks as they feel. However, those safety checks are more for a warm and fuzzy feeling for them, not for me as a professional, because I'm going to make sure that we check it the way that I need to check it in front of the right people and individually. If they feel like they need to do it again, then by all means.
Okay.
But that's rare.
They played the behind-the-scenes footage in order for Mr. Carpenter to comment upon the gun handling which took place on set.
Got a little fight to him. Everyone works out.
So I'm stopping that at 21 seconds. Do you see anything concerning in this video?
And the number one thing is muzzle discipline. That stunt performer, I'm assuming that's a stunt performer right there, has got what appears to be live weapons, and he's got zero muzzle discipline. He's holding the shotgun, and if you back it up to the beginning, he points it almost directly at, I believe it's Joel Souza, right at the front, or I'm not sure who that is, but he's handling that weapon. That weapon should be turned down at the ground, muzzle pointed down when he's carrying it, and his pistol should be holstered and never brought out, which he doesn't, but he carries the shotgun muzzle up. You can back it up a little bit more. Right. Come on back a little bit. Right about all in here. I guess that's the young child actor right there. So these are just examples of muzzle discipline. You never let the muzzle of the weapon cover anything you're not willing to harm.
Come on, little piggy.
You could honestly probably wrap the shotgun if you wanted. That'll be delicious.
Do you know whose voice that is?
I do not, and I did not quite hear that. I've got bad hearing, sorry. Terrible hearing.
Come on, little piggy.
You could honestly probably wrap the shotgun if you wanted. That'll be delicious.
That's where we like.
Do you know who that female's voice is?
Yeah.
Okay. For the purposes of my next question, let's assume that that is the voice of Hannah Gutierrez.
Okay, and what did she say? I heard shotgun.
Let me replay it for you, because I'll get it wrong.
Got a little fight to him. Come on, little piggy.
You could honestly probably wrap the shotgun if you wanted. That'll be delicious.
That's where we like them.
You could honestly
Wrap the shotgun?
wrap the shotgun.
For the scene, I think,
That's
is
right.
Probably what they're discussing.
Right. Wrap it around him and hold him in place with it, right.
So, assuming that's Ms. Gutierrez that we can hear, and she's present,
Right.
what should she be doing with this stuntman that we've seen with his bad muzzle discipline?
Right. She, like I say, tightening him up, pull him off, discreetly and starting off, say, hey, look, be careful where you point the muzzle of the weapon. You're swinging it around pretty haphazardly. Hopefully it's already been checked properly. Then, give him a little coaching.
I don't even have to hurt. That was a 0.
Do you see Ms. Gutierrez there?
I do.
And you've seen this video before, right?
I have.
I'm at 8 seconds, just for the record.
0.
What is Ms. Gutierrez doing?
She's holding that double barrel shotgun pointed up at her neck and face.
Why would that be concerning to you?
Never let the muzzle of the weapon cover anything you're not willing to harm. It's a fundamental safety rule. You treat all weapons as they're always loaded, also fundamental safety rule.
How would you expect proper gun safety on a movie set if the armorer is not following basic gun safety?
That's a very good question. It would be hard to implement.
States Exhibit 155.
Sounds like a Saturday night.
Almost. A wire.
So like, careful with the human behind you. Gotcha. So you just shoot it like this, right? No.
And what are we doing here? States Exhibit 155.
He actually did a 360-degree muzzle discipline breach on that one. So he went around in a full circle with the muzzle at everyone in the vicinity, and then he handed the weapon to the young actor.
And in a circumstance like this, what is the responsibility of the armorer?
Just to intercede. I mean, I would have walked in, let's just assume this was the first time I saw this, and I was standing right behind where you're seeing camera. I would have saw him with the muzzle. I'd have said, hey, Bill, or whatever his name is, I'd say, Bill, listen, make sure you keep that thing slung down while I'm sitting here watching you if we're about to, do this scene. Now, if we're not about to do the scene, he doesn't even have the weapon at all, so it's a moot point. But let's assume that we're just about to film this, and I've given it and done the safety checks. And if I had seen him handing a weapon off to anyone, much less a young, underage person, that would have been the end of that. He would not have been handling a weapon anymore. In my, if anything to do with me personally.
States Exhibit 156.
We need a Bernie pad.
Okay, y'all. Go ahead, put it in and put it on 24. Then I go 3, 2, 1. There you go. Alright, Candy, I'm going hot. Yeah, do it.
And did you just see Ms. Gutierrez come into the frame?
I did.
We need a Bernie pad.
Okay, y'all. Go ahead, put it in and put it on 24. Then I go 3, 2, 1. There you go. Alright, Candy, I'm going.
Do you see what she's doing?
Yeah, she's just walking in frame, in front of frame.
Does she have anything in her hand?
Could you back it up one more time, please? I was watching the stunt performer behind him. Okay, she's carrying the double barrel shotgun, it looks like. Muzzle end up.
Is that a proper way to carry that gun?
It is not.
Is that a safe way to carry that gun?
It is not. And you see the stunt performer in the rear swinging that handgun around, which what I was watching. He was actually pointing. He was talking and pointing with his firearm. Now, you asked previously why you don't hand off live firearms to stunt performers. One of the reasons, there's your reasons right there. If they don't have it in their hand until they need it, then there's no chance of them being unsafe with it.
I'm going to try to get up to what you're describing. You saw that in this video?
Yes, it's the guy with the
right there.
Right there. He's talking and discussing what he's doing and using his pistol as a pointing stick. Again, we have to assume all weapons are always loaded, and in this case, may well have been.
Okay.
Ryan Winterston was one of the producers who helped secure the financing of Rust.
The primary reason that we've asked you here today is because the defendant testified at an OSHA, or actually it was an Occupational Safety Board hearing. And during the hearing, she testified that she spoke to two producers, one named Ryan and one named Nathan. She wasn't clear about the last names.
but she did identify the first name. She said that she had come to Ryan and Nathan and complained that she needed additional armor time to work, in particular with Mr. Alec Baldwin concerning his cross draw. Do you have any recollection of a conversation with the defendant about her needing additional armor time?
I don't recollect that conversation.
Okay, and do you believe that she had that conversation with you, that it would be something you would have remembered?
I believe so, that I would, if the conversation did happen.
Okay. Did you have many conversations with her?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so it's likely something you would have remembered, you say?
I assume so.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Is it true that a film that's made here in New Mexico can have it actually receive about 40% of its costs back as a transferable and sellable tax credit?
I don't know the exact. There is a tax credit though.
Okay, you don't know the specifics, but would you agree with me that there is a tax credit where you get costs back?
Yes.
And that tax credit is in fact transferable and saleable?
I don't know specifically. I know that at some point there is a credit that can be monetized.
Okay, and that credit that's monetized, that would be there regardless of whether the film even makes money at the box office, right?
I believe so.
So would you agree with me then that Rust was essentially a tax shelter?
I don't understand the question.
Okay, do you know what a tax shelter is?
I don't know the definition.
Nathan Klinger was another producer, also involved in raising finance for the film.
Are you aware of any of Rust's costs being returned by New Mexico's tax credits?
What do you mean by returned?
I guess I mean by being able to claim costs as a tax credit.
Yeah, a percent of the budget would be a tax credit.
Do you know what percent of the budget is a tax credit?
Not directly. My assumption is somewhere between 20 and 25%.
John Ziello was the key rigging grip on the movie Rust. When questioned, he recounted his concerns about safety regarding the guns on set and said he was within earshot when the fatal shooting took place.
What did you do when you realized that there was some type of an emergency?
I immediately ran into the church.
And what did you do when you got inside the church?
I saw Halyna laying on the floor being worked on by the medic, and Joel was to the left, and our dolly grip Ross was attending him. And at that time all the pews were still really tight up on them, so I immediately started chucking pews out of the way, and I moved the dolly, and I cleared room for them to work on Halyna.
And did you stay in the church while they were performing life-saving measures on Miss Hutchins?
Yeah, I did. I was, excuse me. I was directly involved in first aid with her for a number of minutes before the paramedics had arrived on the scene.
And when you say that you were directly involved in first aid with her, do you have any first aid training?
No, I was just assisting. The medic was having trouble keeping the oxygen mask on Halyna's face. She was flailing and tearing it off, and myself, the gaffer, Serge, and our Steadicam operator, Reed, were all around helping stabilize her. I had her head and neck, Serge had her arms, and Reed had her ankles, I believe.
Was it apparent to you that she had suffered some type of a serious injury?
Yeah.
David John Halls was a first assistant director of 30 years' experience. Rust would be the last film on his CV before his retirement.
Is part of your role as the first assistant director to be a part of the safety check of firearms that's taking place on set?
Yes.
Can you just describe for the jury generally the way that should work?
Yeah.
I was going to say typically, but usually, all the time, whenever there's a firearm on set. I do not work with a lot of first assistant directors, but I am assured that this is a protocol that all assistant directors follow. That whenever a firearm is on set, I make an announcement. In the case of Rust, I had a wireless microphone that was connected to a public address, a speaker system, so everybody could hear. And all the time, whenever there was a firearm on set, I would make an announcement there was a firearm or firearms on set. I'm inspecting them with the armorer. If anybody else would like to inspect the gun, now would be the time. And you're certainly welcome to do that. I would also, if there was ever an incident where the firearm had to be fired, a blank, I would make that announcement. There will be live fire in this shot. Ear and eye protection are provided. Please protect your ears.
Let's talk about October 21st. I'm gonna start with you after the lunch hour. What was happening after lunch? What were we doing there?
We were preparing a shot for Mr. Baldwin's character. He was sitting in a pew. He's been on the run. He's taking refuge in this old church, and he's sitting in the pew. And what we were photographing. I'm sorry. I'm trying to avoid the word shot. We were preparing for this shot. Mr. Baldwin sitting in the pew. It was basically from his waist to the top of his head, and his action was just to pull out the revolver. And in the story, he's pointing the revolver at two U.S. Marshals that have come into the church.
Who called Mr. Baldwin to set?
I did.
Did you, at the same time, make any request for the armorer or armorer services?
I did not.
Did you ask for the gun?
I did not ask for the gun.
And why wouldn't you have asked for the gun?
Because it's normal procedure on certainly all of the productions that I've worked on with firearms. And it's not just for firearms, it's for props and wardrobe, that when first team is called to set, it's announced over a walkie-talkie. The first assistant director would go on to the walkie-talkie and say, "Camera is ready, first team, please." This alerts all the different departments. Certainly costumes, because they're going to need to do whatever, put a piece of costume on the actor, make adjustments. Hair and makeup, they're going to need to do their touches. Props, they're going to need to give the prop that's needed to the actor. And this is also a signal, a cue to the armorer that the actor that needs the firearm is going to be on set, and I should be there. The armorer, the armorer, I should be there to give the gun to the actor.
Okay. After the setting up of the shot, after you sitting in for Mr. Baldwin, just to be clear, it's your recollection that Mr. Baldwin came in and Ms. Gutierrez came in around the same time?
Yes.
Okay. She does the gun check with you. You see an empty gun. To your recollection, Ms. Gutierrez hands the gun to Mr. Baldwin. Is that right?
That's correct.
What happens after that? How do we end up with a gun that is no longer empty?
I did not see the gun taken away from Mr. Baldwin. I'm still in the same position, facing him, body width to his left, no more than 5 feet in front of him. You know, as an assistant director, you're looking around, you're observing, you're communicating with people. I did not see Ms. Gutierrez take the gun from Mr. Baldwin, but she appeared back on my left-hand side, and she said that she had dummy rounds into the revolver.
And at that point in time, was another safety check done?
She opened up the latch to the revolver. I recall seeing 3 to 4 what I believe to be dummy rounds. I had seen the dummy rounds before.
And when you say you saw them before, are you talking about that day or?
Before that day.
Okay, and let me ask you, under what circumstances would you have seen the dummy rounds if the only other time that guns were dummied up was a rifle?
Yes, and I believe on that day, I did see those dummy rounds on her cart.
Okay, so you were familiar with what they looked like?
They had a very distinctive, bright brass end to it. What would be the end of the bottom of the shell casing, and all the primers were depressed, meaning that this has already been a bullet that has been fired. And,
but sir, let me ask you, you indicated that you only saw 3 or 4, you didn't see 6.
I don't recall her fully rotating the cylinder.
Okay. You don't recall her fully rotating it?
I do not.
Okay. And even though the cylinder wasn't fully rotated, did you let that safety check sort of pass?
I did.
Okay. And what's your recollection about what happened to the gun after that?
She took the few steps to Mr. Baldwin and gave Ms. Baldwin the gun.
Okay. And let me ask you, sir, were you criminally charged in this case?
I was.
And did you enter a no contest plea to negligent use of a firearm?
I did.
And why did you do that? When I say why, what in your mind caused you to be, what caused a plea to negligent use of a firearm to be appropriate? What did you do that would justify that?
I was negligent in checking the gun properly.
Okay, that's the reason that you took that plea, is that right?
That's correct.
The last person to take the stand on day 6 was Sarah Zachary, prop master of Rust.
Are you still doing work in the film industry?
No.
Why not?
After Rust, I didn't want to work in it anymore.
We understand at some point that there were some accidental discharges on the set. Do you recall those?
Correct, yeah.
Did one of them involve you?
Yes.
Can you just explain to the jury what the circumstances were of that accidental discharge?
Yes. So we had a gunfight between a few different actors where I was helping to load blanks, and when we were going in for another take, I had to unload the blanks that were already discharged and fill the gun with new ones. And as I was loading them and locking the gun back into place, the hammer slipped from my thumb and one of the rounds went off. There is no projectile, so it was just a loud pop and a flash.
Let me ask you this, if you recall, do you recall where Ms. Gutierrez was, the reason that you were doing it and not her?
I believe at that point she was in the bathroom.
And did that incident create any kind of a conflict between you and Ms. Gutierrez?
She just didn't know if I would be capable to work with guns anymore after that, even though I had cleared everything that happened on set. I apologized to everyone. I messaged the people I need to let them know what happened. But I mean, there was just a little bit of disagreement, but then we moved on.
Okay.
Sarah Zachary states that despite being the prop master and therefore in charge of Halyna Gutierrez, she was also assigned the role of armourer's assistant and therefore junior to her. Zachary was given no more than a few minutes training with regards to loading firearms with dummies before she was required to perform the task for real. She states that she did not load Alec Baldwin's gun as Gutierrez did that herself.
So the 2 revolvers that you loaded with dummies, Mr. Ackles' gun and the other gentleman, what happened to those revolvers?
I believe I threw them away.
No. What happened to
sorry.
the revolvers?
The revolvers? We took them back to the truck with the rest of them.
I'm sorry. It's okay. I know. Have you ever testified before?
No.
Okay. I know. It's not the easiest of things. You take the Ackles gun and Swin's gun and you put dummies in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with the guns at that moment?
Sorry.
That's okay. I'll get you there. It's all right.
I took them to Dave to check, and then I gave them off to the actors.
So you provided them to those actors, and then they were out of your hands?
Yes.
And did you touch any other guns or dummy ammunition prior to the incident?
No. Not that day.
Right.
Okay.
Not that day. Thank you. So after you hand those guns off to those actors, what do you do? What are you doing when the incident occurs?
I am at the prop cart with Nicole, prepping props for the next day, going over the preliminary schedule.
So you're at the prop cart, and do you have any idea where Ms. Gutierrez is?
No.
What happens next?
I hear the gunshot go off and Joel scream.
When you heard the sound, what did it sound like to you? Did it sound like something that you were accustomed to hearing?
No.
How did it sound compared to, you've heard blanks go off, right? Is that a yes?
Yes.
That's okay. And how did this sound compare to the sound of a blank?
It was louder.
How long after you heard that sound did you hear Mr. Souza scream?
Immediately.
And did you have any idea what happened?
If you're waiting for Halyna Gutierrez to take the stand, then spoilers, that does not happen. It's the prosecution's job to find her guilty, not for her to prove her innocence. But she has already given her testimony to the police and without legal representation present. Day 7, Sarah Zachary returns to the stand.
Ms. Zachary, in this case, you agreed to cooperate with the state. Is that true?
Yes.
And you agreed to come in and testify against Ms. Gutierrez-Reed. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as part of that, you entered into a cooperation agreement with the state. Is that right?
Yes.
And that cooperation agreement indicates that if you agree to testify and you have to provide truthful testimony, that you will not be prosecuted for any crime. Is that right?
Yes.
So, as part of your being here, you have a complete immunity from being prosecuted, correct?
I guess.
Well,
Can you speak up, please?
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to move closer.
It's okay. Is that better? Is that your understanding of the document, that you have that you're not going to be prosecuted, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Joel Souza was the writer and director of Rust. He was also injured in the shooting, but had since recovered.
How did you become involved in the movie Rust?
I had made a movie called Crown Vic that came out, I think, in 2018 or 2019. And there was a time when the actor Alec Baldwin was going to be starring in that movie. And as happens with independent movies, you get ready to go, your financing falls apart, you push the boulder uphill again, your financing falls apart, you rinse and repeat endlessly, sometimes it seems like. But the schedule sort of ran out on us and he wasn't able to star in it. He stayed on as a producer. After that movie, he liked it, and I think he felt like he missed out or something. So we talked about doing another project together with him as an actor. And I had a couple of things in mind, one of which I wanted to make a Western. And he thought that sounded interesting. And so he hired me to write the script.
Okay, so you actually wrote the script for Rust.
Yeah.
And then at some point, did you begin preparations to actually turn that script into a movie?
Yeah, and it was sort of a similar situation with the one I talked about before. You meet with a lot of different people who hopefully can put financing together for you for the movie, and you get close, and then it would fall apart and get close. You have these different iterations, and you start thinking about where you're going to film. But eventually, yeah, a group of producers came on that was able to secure financing for it, and so then the discussions began about where you would film. New Mexico has a pretty robust tax incentive and works for many reasons for a Western. And then, yeah, so from that point forward, it was sort of, we would kind of in earnest begin to start preparing to go into what's called pre-production, which is just a period in the months before you actually start filming.
And how did Ms. Hutchins become involved in the movie Rust?
So over time, just generally as a director, if I would see the work of a cinematographer that I admired, I would just make a note of it, make a note of their name. And I had seen a trailer for a movie she did. I think it was called Arch Enemy. And I just was impressed visually. It looked like something that was sort of it fit my style. And so I looked into some of her other work, and I had added her to a list of other names I had put together over the years. I can't remember what publication, if it was an American cinematographer or something like that, but they had named her one of 10 cinematographers to watch. That's a big deal. And so when the time came, generally I would ask one of the producers to start, if you could, reach out to their agents, and I could start talking to people, and these are the people I'm most interested in, and they would do that and see who's available and who's not. And then I can't remember the exact number of people I spoke to, the exact number of cinematographers. It was a decent amount, more than 7 or 8. And but we had it was all over Zoom. We were in the middle of COVID still. We had a very long Zoom conversation where it's those kind of great conversations where first you're sort of talking about what are your influences, what are your that, and by the end you're just enjoying a great conversation. And in the end, it had come down to her and a few other women who I was a fan of, and they were all excellent, but something about Halyna, we were really, really, really in tune with what we both thought the movie should be. She had some really interesting references she would make. And my references would always tend to be a little more mainstream, and she would be talking about some avant-garde Russian filmmaker, and that's a hole in my game, and she was going to fill it, and I loved that. And so that's how I asked the producers to told them that's who I wanted. Please don't botch the deal, and because she's great, and so that's how we came to work together. So.
And approximately, if you recall, when did you first meet Ms. Gutierrez?
In person, I had a phone call with her before I ever met her. One of the folks from the production office, I can't remember if it was Gabby or Roe, had told me that they had found an armorer. They told me that it was Hannah Gutierrez Reed. I had, of course, heard of Thel Reed. In the business, who hasn't? And so they told me that they had found her. So I was keen on having what's called a show and tell, where you would basically have all the weapons that would be used for the movie more or less laid out on tables, and you would then match the cast up with what looks best for their characters and makes the most sense story-wise. And so I wanted to have that, and so the production had her call me, and she introduced herself to me, and we spoke over the phone the first time then. And then a few days later, I can't remember exactly how much, it was a day later, a few days later, I met her in person at the show and tell, and then she was training people that day as well.
Can you give us an idea of what your focus is in a given day on the set?
Yeah, it's mostly about who you work with and interact with most. My most direct interactions are with my director of photography, and as a byproduct of that, the camera team. but you're also talking to wardrobe and production design a lot because you're moving from set to set. They're asking you, is this right? Is this okay? Is this okay? So in general, yeah, I would work, my script supervisor is always there with me as well. But in general, you work with the creative departments. You are spending a ton of time with your cast, with your actors. You're blocking the scenes out. You're walking them through their performances. You're sort of getting on the same page together.
Are you largely focused on the behavior of the armorer?
No. No, I mean, you see them when they are there at set, but no, I don't generally interact with the armorer during the course of the day on set.
Okay. And let me ask you, after the show and tell and the training that you described, did you reach out to Ms. Gutierrez and compliment her?
Well, there was a day so I think, if memory serves, I think the first day of gunfire on the movie was day 3, because that was sort of, that day was on my mind from Jump Street with this production, because it was our biggest day of the movie. It was, just to give you sort of an idea of the scale of the day, it was not just, we had a large part of the day was there was an enormous shootout going on between these bad guys and good guys. I think 4 people on one side and 4 people on the other side. There's an enormous amount of stunt work that goes with that. There's gunfire, there's the actors, but then before that, there's also, we were walking the characters through town, so the town was filled with background, which is what we call the extras who come. There were horses, there were wagons. It was an enormous day. And at the end of the day, we had made it. And it was a tough day. And when we have days like that, I generally like to go around and thank folks and congratulate people on doing a good job. If I texted her that day, it would have been because I guess I just didn't find her on set at the end of it. But the day came off, and I think, everybody had a big part in that. So. Okay.
And after that day, you were complimentary of her?
After that day?
Or on that day?
On that day, yeah.
And you were complimentary of the other folks on set that day?
Yeah. No, it's, I don't know if anyone's ever spent time on set, but it's quite a thing to see. The people, okay. It's just a lot of professionals doing some pretty amazing stuff. So.
Okay, great. And can you give the jury an idea of, at the beginning of the filming of Rust, did you even understand what a dummy round was?
Not really. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of exposure to that kind of stuff before. I wonder, I don't exactly have a clear memory of it. I have a feeling the first time I heard the word dummy is after everything happened, to be frank.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, during the time that you were the director on Rust, and to be clear, you are directing the scenes.
Yes.
So when the actors are outfitted with their revolvers and they're preparing to film the scene, you're the person that's there directing. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm talking it through with the actors, yeah.
Did you have an opportunity to see Ms. Gutierrez engage in her armor duties by providing firearms to actors or retrieving those firearms?
Yeah, I remember times seeing her do that. I do, yes.
Was there ever a time, well, let me ask you this, when we talk about how the armorer and the assistant director are you familiar with the way that the armorer and the assistant director are supposed to do a safety check of guns?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I have a pretty good understanding of it.
Okay. And what is your understanding of whether or not the armorer should load the gun in the presence of the assistant director?
Ooh, to be honest, that I don't really know.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's supposed to come to that moment loaded or if they're supposed to do it in that exact moment. That I'm not certain.
Let me ask you this. Did you ever see Ms. Gutierrez load a gun with dummy rounds in the presence of the actor or the assistant director?
I mean, gosh, nothing that really sticks out to me. I remember times when she would call out what was in it, but I don't remember really seeing her specifically putting things in.
Okay. Do you ever recall any safety checks where you saw Ms. Gutierrez shake rounds before loading them into the gun?
I never saw anyone shake around, no.
Thank you. I'm going to take you to October 21st of 2021. Can you explain to the jury how that day began?
Yeah, we got there early, as we always did. It was still dark. Gaffer was waiting there for me with mittens and a hat for both me and Halyna, as he always did.
And who was the gaffer?
Serge Svetnoy.
Okay.
And we had realized that I think it was 6 members of the camera team were going to be leaving. And so we knew we were going to not get started, really. It was very early. I think Halyna knew that they were going to have to start finding other local folks that were available for work to get us there. And so things started a little later that day than they generally did. And once, I don't remember exactly the number of people that were brought in after the other team had left. I'm
gonna stop you right
Sure.
there. In your experience in the film industry, is it unusual for this kind of a disagreement to occur between production and the camera team?
I haven't had it happen on one of the movies I've directed, but I know other folks who have had that happen, yes.
And were you particularly concerned about whether the cameramen that quit were disgruntled or had any malintent towards the filming?
I wasn't concerned about anybody having any malintent. I think there was a decent amount of acrimony between them and the production office and producers over some things that have been sort of going back and forth. I think they sort of, as they should, they tried to sort of, keep that thing away from me. But I hear things, what's going on? You want people to be happy. You want people to feel good about what they're doing. So,
did you think that the camera crew's decision to leave was somewhat reasonable?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I wouldn't want to answer for them. I knew it was going to put us behind the 8 ball a little bit, but then again, people have their concerns. People have bills to pay. They have their own needs. At the end of the day, they did what they did. When they left, I went and shook hands, and I had no hard feelings, and I hope they had no hard feelings toward me, and said I hope we would work together again, because frankly they were pretty darn good at what they did. Okay. But I think, again, I'm not 100% privy to all the goings on there, but I think people have their concerns and the things they need to do. I think they felt they did what was right. So. Okay.
So you get to set, you understand that you're going to lose the camera crew, and I think we left off where Ms. Hutchins was going to try to fill some of those roles.
Yeah, I think between Halyna and I think the production office, they would start putting out some feelers in an urgent manner that we need, And so then at some point, some folks came. I don't know exactly how many, there might have been 3 or 4. We were going to be down a camera that day because one of the folks that left was the A camera operator. And so we knew we were going to be operating under only one camera for the rest of the day, which, sometimes you do only use one camera when you're filming, but that's going to slow you down, because sometimes when you're filming, you can have 2 cameras catching something at once, and now you're going to need to do that twice. So it's going to take twice the time. And so, yeah, we were sort of gearing up and girding ourselves for that and talking about our plan for the day, how we were going to go about this. Because it was already, schedule-wise, it was already going to be a difficult day.
So what was the plan for the day?
The plan for me, as I saw it, I sort of took Dave, our first assistant director, aside, and Halyna, and just said, look, I think we all understand when you look at this day as scheduled, we're not going to make this. This is not going to happen. And what I don't want to do is start short-changing the scenes that we have in front of us. What we're going to do is we are going to do the scenes that are in front of us. We're going to do them properly. We're going to work our way through. And whatever's left at the end of the day, we can't control that. That's left at the end of the day, and we'll have to figure out tomorrow. But today, we're going to do what we can.
Were you inside the church immediately after lunch was over?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you stay inside the church the entire time between when lunch ended and when the shooting occurred?
No. I at a certain point went outside of the church.
And why were you doing that?
So when we were setting up the camera angle, we were talking about what the shot was supposed to be. And forgive me if I over-explain this, but the scene is very tense, right? And so you achieve that through editing and camera angles. And so you want to see Rust sitting there. Is he dead? Is he alive? The men coming closer, they're ordering him to give up. And then you cut to close-ups, and you're cutting from the character to the lawmen back and forth. And the first shot was supposed to essentially be the first moment we might realize that Rust is not, in fact, as injured as we might have thought. And so it was going to be a close-up on the weapon coming out of the holster. And so we had talked about that a little bit. Halyna and I had talked, and there's Reed there, Serge was there, they're talking about the lighting. And then at a certain point, it's time to set the camera angle up. It's not a rehearsal yet. You're just sort of what they call auditioning the shot. Like, do you like this camera angle?
Okay.
And so once they do that, the camera was on the dolly, which is a gigantically heavy piece of equipment. And it was in the middle of an aisle between pews. So the pews were here and the dolly's in the middle. And when you're in a tight space like that, I generally, when they start moving the gear around, feel like I'm in the way. And so I got out of the way, went outside, and I figured, we still had one monitor. There was no village anymore that day, or that I'm aware of. Not in the traditional sense that there would be monitors lined up, but there was still a monitor that I could see the camera through.
Where was that monitor?
That was outside of the church. I don't remember if they had it on a stand or if it was on a cart. It was not a big one, but they were trying to get image up on the monitor having come back from lunch. And after a time, the image was just not coming up. And so I decided, before they get too far afield, if they're sort of setting this up in a way that I think isn't going to work, I would like to at least stop them and say, no, let's move it here. And so that's when I went back inside to have a look.
So at any point in time, did you see Ms. Gutierrez enter the church with the firearm?
No, it wasn't. I wasn't aware of her coming in or leaving or anything. The church was, there's an enormous amount going on. A million voices, it feels like. The special effects guys are rigging things up in the roof for debris for later on. When the shooting starts, there'll be debris falling down, and there are people working the lights. There are people moving the cameras. There's a lot going on, and so I didn't really register that.
Do you have any idea who provided Mr. Baldwin his revolver for the scene?
No, I mean, just beyond in a general sense about who's supposed to hand it off, but no, I didn't see anybody give it to him.
Okay. At some point, does Mr. Baldwin get his revolver?
I mean, he clearly had it. The interesting thing, I never saw him with it. I mean, he clearly had it because of what happened, but when I went in to look at to see what was going on with the camera angle, I remember there's sort of a big group kind of hovered around where he would be. He would be sitting in the pew. I just couldn't see him. I'm not the tallest guy in the world. And so what I wanted to do was get up behind Halyna to try to sneak a look over her there's a little tiny monitor on the side of the camera to at least see that, to see what it was looking like. But I never even got a look at that.
Okay, so explain to us when you're going into the church and why and what you do and what happens.
So I went inside again to try to see what the angle was. There were a lot of voices. I heard Alec's voice. I heard Halyna's voice. Everyone sort of talking at once. I don't have a clear memory of how long I was standing behind her. I know I got up behind her to try to see on the monitor, and there was an incredibly loud bang that was not like the half and quarter loads you hear on a set. Those are they're loud poofs and pops. This was deafening. And it felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat to my shoulder. I remember that distinctly, and sort of stumbling back and shouting. I don't remember exactly what I said.
Were you able to see Ms. Hutchins at that time?
I did. I remember sort of stumbling back, and I either fell to my knees or I was sitting, and I distinctly remember her being lowered to the ground. People had her sort of by either side, and I still didn't quite know what had happened. Nothing made sense. I remember initially thinking, had she been startled by it, and they were sitting her down as a result, and then I saw the blood on her back.
Day 8 started with on-set stills photographer Karen Cohen reviewing some of the pictures she took during the production.
Ma'am, do you recognize this photo?
I do.
Can you tell us the date that this photo was taken?
I believe it was on the 15th.
Of what month?
October.
And would that have been 2021?
Yes.
And do you recognize this person here?
Yes, that's Hannah.
Okay. And who's this person here?
Alec.
And why were you taking this photo?
I just shoot a lot, and I think the behind the scenes is really interesting, what's going on. So they're having a conversation about what's about to happen. And
okay.
That's it.
Do you know what this is in Ms. Gutierrez's hand?
It looks like the gun belt. I'm guessing for Alec.
Okay.
Or a bandolier, one of those.
Okay.
I see a gun in it.
All right. I'm going to zoom in on this photo.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Yes.
When you look at, well, tell us what's in that gun belt.
Ammunition and a gun.
And do you notice anything about the center primers of the ammunition that's in that belt?
One is silver and quite different from the other 3, 4.
All right.
Marissa Poppel, the crime scene investigator, was recalled to the stand.
I would like to show you a series of photographs, and I believe there is no objection to these photos. What is that a photo of?
This is a photo of dummy rounds that were removed from a box that was located in the prop truck, and then they were laid out on brown paper and rephotographed.
What is that, and how does it relate to the photo that we just looked at?
These are those same rounds while they were still in the foam insert.
And are these the rounds that came out of the box that had the blue Sharpie writing on the label?
Yes.
Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yes, this is a box of live rounds that were collected from PDQ.
And is one of them dissimilar than the others?
Yes, in the bottom corner, one of them has a silver primer.
Can you talk about this one over here?
Yes.
Was that the only live round with a silver primer that you found at PDQ?
No.
Is that a close-up of that live round?
Yes.
Is the head stamp of this live round the same as the head stamp of the live rounds from the set of Rust?
No.
How many live rounds at PDQ with silver primers did you discover and photograph?
10.
On the set of Rust, Rebecca Smith was responsible for craft services, or as we would call them in the UK, catering. And she was staying at the inn at Santa Fe during production, where Hannah Gutierrez was also staying.
Ms. Smith, were you present at the hotel the evening of October 21st, 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
And at some point that evening, did you go to Ms. Gutierrez's hotel room?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
Court and I forget what his name was, but the set steward were in her hotel room and needed to go to the store to get something and did not want to leave her alone, so they called me and asked me to come up to her room.
Okay, and did you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you stay with Ms. Gutierrez for a little while?
Yes, ma'am.
And then at some point, did you leave?
Yes.
Did anything unusual happen when you left Ms. Gutierrez's room?
Yes. She asked me if I could hold on to something for her. I said yes. She put it in my hand, and I walked out as there was a knock on the door.
And after you left the room, did you look to see what she had placed in your hand?
Yes.
And can you describe, without making any assumptions about what it was, can you just describe what you saw in your hand?
Yes. It was a clear Ziploc baggie with a green small Ziploc baggie inside, and there was powder inside the green baggie.
What color was the powder?
White.
If I want you to compare this to like a sugar packet that you
It
would.
was definitely not sugar.
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Let me get my.
Look like sugar.
Let me
anyway.
get my question out.
Okay.
I want to have a discussion about how much was in the green.
Okay.
Part, and I want you to compare it to a sugar packet that you would open and put in coffee or tea.
Okay.
How many of those do you think it was?
Maybe 4 or 5.
Okay. And Ms. Smith, how old are you?
I'm 51.
And when you were a younger person, did you have an opportunity to use the drug cocaine?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a recovering addict.
Are you familiar with what cocaine looks like?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the way that cocaine is packaged?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on that experience, what did you believe to be in the bag?
I believed it to be cocaine.
And what did you do with it?
I threw it in the hallway trash can before even going downstairs to my hotel room.
And why did you throw it in the hallway trash can?
Because, like I said, I am a recovering addict. I can't, first and foremost, have it in my possession. And second, I was really very offended, and I didn't want anything to do with the situation anymore.
Okay. After October 21st passes, did you receive any text message communications from Ms. Gutierrez?
Yes. Several.
And generally speaking, what was the theme of those messages?
I want my stuff back.
Other than the bag containing the green bag containing the white powder, other than that item, did you have anything else that belonged to Ms. Gutierrez?
No, ma'am.
Did you bring this information to the attention of law enforcement?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
Like I said, I didn't want to be involved in the situation if I didn't have to be.
Okay. And how long after the incident do you think it was before someone reached out to you to talk to you about this?
I believe it was about September of 2023 when you contacted me about it.
And I personally called you?
Yes, ma'am. Texted, I believe it was.
Okay. And did you tell me on that day what you have testified to today?
Yes, ma'am.
That added a very interesting plot twist quite late in the show. Seth Kenny was next on the stand, and he was the supplier of prop weapons for the film. And he'd worked with Thurl Reed, armourer and stepfather of Halyna Gutierrez.
So how long have you owned PDQ props?
It's been about 12 years, maybe 13.
Okay. And at some point, sir, did you meet a gentleman by the name of Thurl Reed?
I did, very briefly. Oh, I was aware of Thale Reed because we were on opposite ends. He was working set on Django Unchained, and I was behind the scenes working with the prop master, preparing the weapons that were going to be used by cast. So I was aware of him then, and then very briefly one day, a prop master brought him into the LA Prop House Arsenal, where I did actually meet him. It wasn't again until about 2018 where we became friends.
What, at some point in time, did you and Mr. Reed work on a film together where Mr. Reed was an armorer or a coach and you were the vendor, the supplier?
That was, it was 1883. It wasn't a feature film. It was more of a, one-run episodic. Well, I had to push hard to get him onto the crew and hired. And so we talked about it, and I'm fairly tight with the prop master. Again, we've been working together since Wind River. And I convinced him to hire Thale and to keep him on longer than most gun coaches or older persons would be allowed on set. Frankly, the Texas heat was just too much for him.
And just so that everyone knows, approximately how old is Mr. Reed now?
Exactly, I don't know, but he's got to be pushing 80.
Okay. So in what capacity was Mr. Reed hired on the set of 1883? Was he a coach or an armorer?
Primarily, he was the gun coach, and he had difficulty with the Texas heat. So I was constantly making sure that he was in an air-conditioned environment, and that's not something that a set on Texas allows for.
Sure. Describe for the jury the kind of gun coaching that was being done on 1883.
Well, it involved initially, it was pretty casual, and we were using replicas, and it happened to be Taylor Sheridan's private arena.
When you say replicas, are you talking about real guns or fake guns?
These are fake guns,
okay.
Replicas, yeah. And so that's where it started. It's kind of a meet and greet and just get some of the basics down. And Thale, he's been doing it for so many decades, 60 plus years as a gun coach and armorer. He knows small bite-sized pieces to the actors is best.
Okay.
So.
Was there coaching sessions that included real firearms?
There were. Then at some point, it was decided, and I'm not sure who made that decision, that they actually wanted to set up a private range on a portion of Taylor Sheridan's private ranch with an appropriate backstop and controls. And that is where the cast, it was a bit of a team building as well, learned about how the functioning of the firearms, and we were mixed between blanks and live. We had live ammunition in one area and then take people off to the side and shoot blanks. And essentially the safe distance on most blanks is about 20 feet. So we would take them away from the firing line and test and train them there. And primarily,
they had gotten it by that point. They had really understood for their characters what they needed to be and do on set.
So you mentioned that during these coaching sessions, some of the cast was shooting with live ammunition. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall what kind of caliber weapons the cast was using to shoot that live ammunition from?
It was a mix we had available from memory, 12 gauge birdshot, just the basics of that. I don't think we even touched that ammo. The prop master had some guns that were chambered in .357, I believe, some lever actions, and also in .45 Colt or .45 long Colt. Both are okay. Both
All right.
terms.
Can you explain to the jury, well, let me ask you this. Do you know where the live ammunition came from that was used in those coaching sessions?
I do.
Where did it come from?
The .45 long Colt came from Thale. He had a number of reloads that I asked him to bring because at that time it was very difficult to source live ammunition. It was difficult. So he had what turned out to be 325 reloads of .45 long Colt.
And when you say reload, what are you talking about?
Well, it's once used case. So every case of ammunition starts out as new. And at that point,
What do you mean when you say case?
the actual brass case. So if we talk about a round of ammunition, there are 4 components to that. There's the yellowish colored brass case, the primer that is pressed into the base of the case. Then we have gunpowder, some type of, could be black powder, synthetic black powder, modern smokeless powder, and then you need a projectile. And so those four components make up a single round of ammunition.
Okay, so the live ammunition that was used for the coaching session was provided by Mr. Reed.
Correct.
And if you know, I don't know if you do you know where he got it?
Yes, he said he got it from Joe Swanson.
Okay, and who's Joe Swanson?
Joe Swanson is probably the primary supplier of blanks and dummy rounds to worldwide. If you happen to see something go bang in a puff of smoke in a movie or an episodic, a television show, worldwide, chances are that Joe Swanson made it.
And what happened to that ammunition after you finished training the actors on 1883?
Well, that's a little bit hazy. At one point, I do recall that certain things were offloaded from my Sprinter van because they just weren't needed, and that was one of those things. But at some point, it got moved back to Albuquerque, and I've never been able to pinpoint the date.
The live ammunition was moved back to Albuquerque?
Correct.
And specifically, where in Albuquerque was it being housed?
It was in a gray bin marked live ammunition, and it was actually in the bathroom.
Of where?
Of PDQ's location in Albuquerque.
Of your business?
Correct.
Okay. How did you know it was live, and how were you able to keep it separate from dummies and blanks?
Well, it's obviously it's a concern anytime you've got these things in, let's just say, one structure. And in this instance, always better to keep live ammunition near blanks rather than dummy rounds, because dummy rounds and live ammunition can look exactly the same. So if I were to set aside a single blank and a piece of in a single round of live ammunition, it would be obvious which is which just from looking at it. Okay. The same cannot be said for live ammunition. So these are things that should never be next to each other.
Was there another show that you and Mr. Reed both supplied firearms and ammunition to after 1883?
No,
So
not that I recall.
let me, did you supply firearms, or, and when I say ammunition, I apologize, I mean blanks and dummies, to the set of a movie called The Old Way.
Yes, but that was filming concurrently with 1883.
Okay, they were happening at the same time.
Yes.
All right. So what did you provide?
Excuse me. Wait. Actually, sorry. Now that I think about it, actually, Hannah was wrapping The Old Way, and we were still in pre-production at that point. I don't think we had gone to camera yet.
On 1883?
Yeah. I remember being in Texas at the time when Hannah was wrapping out The Old Way, which is essentially concluding filming. No more camera work at all, right? She's packing up her guns, she's packing up her bags to leave Livingston, Montana, and we were still prepping to go to camera, but working for production on 1883.
Okay. So you indicated that Hannah was involved in the movie The Old Way. Can you explain to the jury in what capacity was she working on that film?
Well, it was her first solo lead as head armor, and Thale got in touch with me and said that...
Hang on. I don't want any hearsay.
Okay.
So she was the lead armor, and that was the first movie she was lead armor on.
Correct.
Okay. Explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you supplied to the set of The Old Way.
Roughly half the guns, most of them the long arms, which are lever actions, and shotguns, and single shot rifles as well. And then there was a mix of about 50% Thale, 50% PDQ supplied the blanks. I supplied 14 rounds of 38-40 dummy rounds, and Thale and Hannah supplied the balance of the dummy rounds.
Okay, so you supplied the only dummies that you supplied to The Old Way were caliber 38-40.
Correct.
Did you supply any 45 long Colt dummy rounds to the set of The Old Way?
No, I didn't have any.
And you only supplied 14 38-40 dummies?
It's all I had, yeah.
Okay. And it's your understanding that Mr. Reed and Ms. Gutierrez supplied the remaining dummy rounds to that show?
Yes.
Do you source a lot of your ammunition from Mr. Swanson?
100%. Actually, no, excuse me, 90%.
And do you source from Mr. Swanson?
And again, not ammunition.
Understood.
Just dummy rounds and blanks.
Okay. Do you source both dummy rounds and blanks from Mr. Swanson?
Dummy rounds 100% from Joe Swanson.
Okay. I think we should look at some pictures. Have you ever had a box of dummies from Mr. Swanson with that label?
No, never.
And why would you not have a box with this label if you're sourcing your dummy rounds from Mr. Swanson?
Well, 1883 was the first period show that that I needed 45 long Colt dummy rounds for. Prior to that, even though we had done a flashback scene with Tim McGraw in Yellowstone, there was no call for dummy rounds, or the prop master sourced them elsewhere. So I just never needed them. And when I did, I needed them by the thousands, not by boxes of 50. And so what happened is Joe Swanson, he asked me, do you want me to package them up? I said, no, there's no point, right? It's more work for everybody. So he sent them to me in bulk.
Okay, and so you never had anything like this in your possession?
Never.
And let's talk about the dummy rounds that you provided to the set of Rust. Did you provide 45 long Colt dummy rounds to the set of Rust?
I did. I supplied a single box of 50 on October 12th.
And where did those dummy rounds come from?
They had just come off of the day prior from the prop truck in Texas from 1883.
So when you took the dummy rounds that you supplied to the set of Rust from the prop truck on 1883, walk us through what you did with them.
So the Sarah and Hannah had issues with a couple of guns, and so potentially they needed replacements. There was an issue with the reassembly after cleaning. So I pulled some of PDQ's inventory from the 1883 prop truck to make sure that I had something to replace. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a .45 long Colt chambered gun that matched what they had on Rust, but I did find one chambered in 4440. So I took that gun, a box of 4440 dummy rounds, and also spotted some antiqued 45 long Colt dummy rounds in bulk, and put them literally into a double bag of some type of grocery store bag. And those three items went into my Sprinter van, and I drove straight from that set to my PDQ's location in Albuquerque.
And when you got to the PDQ location in Albuquerque, what did you do with the 45 long Colt dummy rounds that you brought from 1883?
It's kind of an odd thing to say, but because there were probably a considerable amount of money in firearms in the van at the time that were headed back to California, I slept in the van with the guns. Behind closed gates, but that's just what you have to do. So it wasn't until the morning of the 12th that they were brought into the my place, PDQ's location in Albuquerque.
Okay, and what did you do with them when you brought them inside?
Well, I got rid of the grocery bags straight away, and I built a small brown cardboard box, and they got poured into there. Sarah Zachary was running late. When she showed up, I was able to reassemble and test the gun.
And let me stop you real quick, just so that we're connecting all the dots. Why was Sarah Zachary coming to PDQ on October 12th?
Well, she needed to find out whether or not I could quickly reassemble the gun without issue and make sure that it was ready to be used on camera for Rust.
And were you able to do that?
I was.
Okay.
But she ended up running probably 3 hours late, and I had nothing else to do. Essentially, I was just waiting to meet with her and drive to California. So while I was sitting there doing nothing, I looked at these overly antiqued rounds that had been dipped in a chemical that patinaed not only the lead bullets but also the cases very heavily, too heavily, and they didn't look right. They didn't look right for camera. So I just sat there and decided, well, I'll just see what it looks like after I polish them up with some Quado steel wool. And that's what I did. What I realized, though, too, is that some of the chemicals seemed to have leaked into the case, and some of the rattles seemed muddy. And
what do you mean when you say some of the rattles seemed muddy?
Well, Joe Swanson, for the most part, stopped using BBs inside the dummy rounds because the sound guys could hear them on camera. So if the gun is being manipulated, he could actually hear the dummy rounds rattling around. And there's a number of instances where I can hear dummy rounds in TV and movies where I can spot it, and I'm like, oh, you can hear the dummy rounds rattling. It's kind of interesting. So he switched to using a single piece of #2 lead shot, which is an adequate rattle, but it's a little bit muffled. And I suspect what had happened is the chemical had caused some kind of gooey layer, to my best guess. And so I noticed that they just didn't sound safe to me. They just didn't sound like I wanted, Hannah and Sarah to have to be dealing with something that seems odd. And so I selected, before I sat there and polished each dummy round, I had to make sure, one, it rattled before I spent a minute polishing around. If we're talking about a box of 50 plus writing a label on both ends, I sat there with this box for an hour. So they got rattled before they got polished, and then re-rattled to make sure they would rattle without issue, and then individually inserted into the box.
Okay. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is this a photo of?
It's a photo of the brown cardboard box that I had just taped up to purposely hold those aged dummy rounds, and you can see in the picture what they look like before being polished with Quado steel wool.
Okay. Mr. Kinney, what is this a photo of?
That's the same box. Just it's missing I think I saw some spent blank cases in the box, as well as the Quado steel wool.
Okay. Is this a photograph of the dummy rounds that you provided to the set of Rust?
That's correct. So it would have to be the picture was either taken on October 12th or after.
Okay.
Because that box and those dummy rounds didn't exist until that morning of October 12th.
Do you recognize that?
I do.
What's that?
It appears to be that same the foam insert and dummy rounds, the polished antique dummy rounds that I gave to Sarah Zachary on October 12th. Although one of them appears like it doesn't belong.
You talking about this one?
I believe it to be that round. It doesn't look like it's had any aging, and I think I've seen it in other evidence photos where they're laid on their side and it stands out.
What's the round you're talking about?
That's it. If we look at the top row and all the way to the right of the top row, just beneath that, it appears that round is inconsistent. So that round that I've circled in red does not appear like the others, and I have a tough time thinking that I would provided that round.
Day 9, and this is the start of the witnesses for the defense. New Mexico Occupational Safety and Health Administration Compliance Officer Lorenzo Montoya is first on the stand. One of the duties the company for which he works performs is inspecting workplace accidents and incidents which end in a fatality.
The citation was issued because, in our conclusions, we determined that the management team was responsible for a series of failures that, in our opinion, accumulated in an accident.
Okay, and by management team, who do you mean specifically?
Specifically, we mean the chain of command above Hannah Gutierrez, beginning at the lowest level with Sarah Zachary, and then Gabrielle Pickle, and then Dave Halls.
With respect to OSHA's role in this, what exactly is it that your bureau is investigating and looking for?
Our primary purpose is to determine whether any violations of OSHA statute and regulations caused or contributed to the accident that's being investigated.
And ultimately, whose determination was it whether or not to cite Rust Productions with any violations?
It was mine.
Robert Genoway is the Bureau Chief for New Mexico Occupational Safety and Health Administration. He is in a senior position to the previous person and issued the Rust Production a fine of $100,000, reduced on appeal from $136,793, which is the largest penalty the state has imposed since 2010.
Good morning, sir. Can you please state your name again for the jury?
Scott Elliott.
Mr. Elliott, what do you do for a living currently?
I'm currently a private investigator.
I don't want to hit every point that you might make, but I want to hit some of the major ones. First of all, at the scene, at the initial scene when law enforcement responds, can you tell the jury, do you have any conclusions about the quality of the investigation by the sheriffs at the scene?
Yeah, some of that was reached by my own observations and some of it through interviews of the deputies on the scene. I felt like their response was probably not what it should be. There were hundreds of people on that ranch, but if you narrow it down to who was in the church at the time of the shooting and who may have had involvement with the case, for example, the people that were just outside, there was really about 20 people. The first responding deputies, their job is first preservation of life, and then it is preservation of evidence and identifying witnesses and possible suspects. In this case, it was known very quickly who the shooter was, but it wasn't known who the witnesses were. And those witnesses, once they were identified, they should have been segregated so they couldn't talk among themselves.
Now let me stop you right there. When you initially, as a law enforcement homicide detective or somebody going on scene, you identify the shooter, what in your opinion is one of the first things that you should do?
Well, the first thing you do is put someone with that individual, segregate them from everyone else. You also want to, those individuals, since you are preserving evidence, you also want to secure their cell phones.
Now in this case, in the materials you reviewed, did it appear to you that Mr. Baldwin was segregated?
Not at all.
And along with the conclusion you just stated, did it appear that his cell phone was taken from him?
No, it was not.
Mr. Elliott, did it appear to you that at any time at the scene that day, Mr. Baldwin was segregated?
He was not.
Okay. Next, you talked about identifying key witnesses and preserving evidence. Can you explain that a little more?
Yes. Well, the scene was secured. You don't often have a scene of that small of an environment. It was known immediately that the shooting occurred inside that church structure, and that it probably involved a couple of people just outside near that weapons cart. So that was the immediate concern, that area there. And the deputies, one of the early responding deputies did get a pretty good list of who was in the church and gave that to the lieutenant. But those individuals were not segregated from everybody else. They were able to mingle with people who were not on scene, who were in a different part of the ranch. Conversations were taking place. People were talking on cell phones. And it's really unknown who they were talking to.
And what is the danger or what is the concern on the part of an investigator when suspects or witnesses are talking?
Well, a couple things. One, people could be getting their story straight. The other is it causes witnesses to misremember what they did and what they saw. Because in my experience, good, honest citizens try to help. And they'll tell you something that their neighbor told them as if it was something that they saw. And it is just human nature that if you talk about something over and over and over again, eventually there are parts of it that you think that you did, and it was what someone else did. So you want to clean, even if it's very brief and they didn't see very much or they didn't hear very much, you want a clean statement of what their knowledge is.
Okay, and with regard to whether, if that is not done, what can that lead to? What is your conclusion about what can happen if people are not segregated and they're allowed to talk to people?
Well, one, you can delete things off your phone. You can delete photos. It wasn't known at the time if somebody was videotaping what was going on inside on their phone. That's possible. Almost every case you work now, someone has videotaped it with their phone.
Did you also determine, and this is another point, but that someone had left the scene and whether that person had been identified?
As far as I know, they still have not been identified.
With regard to securing the prop card on that scene, what is your opinion as to whether that was appropriately handled?
No, it should have remained in place. There was an individual, Brian, was told to go get the cart. He went out of sight behind the church, on the other side of the church, and then he moved the cart around towards the lieutenant's marked unit. That should not have been done.
as well, what is your opinion as to or do you have any concerns about how the evidence on top of the prop cart was handled?
Well, Lieutenant Benavides took possession of the firearm with an ungloved hand, and he grabbed it right around the cylinder. So the largest portion of the revolver is how he picked up the revolver, put it into his vehicle, at another occasion pulled it out of his vehicle and put it back on the cart. He did the same thing with the ammo boxes from the cart. So you definitely can't preserve evidence by touching things with your bare hands, but it also could have damaged anything that was on the boxes or the firearm prior to him handling it.
Some incredibly legitimate concerns from the private investigator.
Okay, sir, good afternoon. Can you please tell the jury your name again?
Frank Lewis Blair Kuski III.
This gentleman is an expert in period firearms and a collector of the type of guns used in the filming of Rust.
Are you familiar with the revolver in this case, the .45 long Colt?
Absolutely.
Did you bring with you today that revolver? Not that revolver, but a revolver just like that revolver?
Yes, we would call it a sister. It is made by Pieta, the same exact company with nearly sequential serial numbers. It is absolutely identical. Any part would interchange, and it will look exactly like the Baldwin gun.
Sir, if you will, if you could, however the deputy handles this, but if you could retrieve the firearms from behind you.
Do it in public, and I will clarify that it is not loaded. Okay? The first is a real...
Mr. Kuski, are you able to take the cylinder out so you can show everyone also that it's unloaded?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
That's something important. And here is a Genex revolver.
So, Your Honor, I'm going to object. All right, first of all, everybody's nervous because you have not demonstrated to us that they're unloaded. So before you start showing us the weapons, make sure they're unloaded, including that one that you just touched.
For someone who has been recognised as an expert in the field of firearms, he seems, to me at least, to be falling foul of some of the same errors Hannah Gutierrez did.
Okay, sir, now the first thing I want to ask you, comparing the Genex, the replica, to the Pieta, do they share some of the same characteristics?
Yes, they do.
And can you tell the jury, is the Genex made to look like the Pieta?
Absolutely.
And side by side, if you can, and Your Honor, may he step down to show the jury?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, if you can show them the Pieta and the Genex side by side, just so they can see.
This is a Genex. It is a replica, totally unfiring with a block barrel. It functions completely like a regular revolver. The cylinder turns, it will cock, it will snap and fire. It's unable to fire any ammunition. It's used as a replica, it's made of metal, and it functions just like a single-action Army Colt, but it can't fire. I'll bring the next one, and then we'll compare them. Next gun, in a safe position. This is a Pieta revolver. This is the sister gun to the Baldwin gun. It's a .45 caliber single-action 1873 revolver, like was issued to Custer's troops. It is a true .45 long Colt. We call it just Colt. And it was designed for the U.S. Army to be able to kill a man and a horse.
Okay, Mr. Kuski, if you will, using the Genex, the replica, demonstrate that the cocking and proper decocking of that weapon.
Yes. This is one of the primary things that an individual must be trained in to safely cock and decock a Colt revolver or a replica. Now first, the finger has to stay off of the trigger and outside of the trigger guard, no matter what. That's the essential rule of safety. The firearm is cocked with your thumb, you see. Finger's still outside of the trigger. No one touches any trigger. This is now a gun capable of being fired. Now, the first thing I do here is put my thumb on top of it. If I'm not real strong, I put 2 thumbs on. Notice my finger is still completely off the trigger. I then slowly, gently pull the trigger and lower the hammer onto the cartridge. I then back it up to its safe position. Now I will demonstrate the same thing exactly with a real Pieta revolver. Okay, we have Pieta safely aimed. My finger is off the trigger. You can see, this is where it has to stay. If your finger's in there, you can't decock safely. Now, again, we cock 1, 2, 3, 4. C-O-L-T, it clicks. This is a cocked, ready to fire revolver if it were loaded. My finger must stay out of the trigger guard and on the side. Now, I put my finger in, but I don't put it in until I put my thumb here. Even putting it in before, like that, would cause it to fire perhaps. Now, I'm holding the hammer back. I can feel the spring. Everything safe? Now my finger goes on the trigger, pulls the trigger, slowly lowers to a safe position without snapping, and then pulls back to the safety notch, which removes the firing pin from the cartridge. Notice my finger is out of there again, not that the gun is cocked. And that's the only decocking. A guy doing this experience can do it with his thumb, because this is all knurled here, so it can't slip. Finger's out of there. I decocked safely.
In your work as an expert in this case, reviewing all the information, did you agree with Mr. Haig's conclusion regarding violation of some of those safety rules?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you see evidence that Mr. Baldwin was not safe with firearms after there was a yell of cut in a particular scene and he shot a blank after that scene?
Yes, I feel that's unsafe.
Day 10 and the last witness for the defence takes to the stand. P.J. Pesh is a film director with 6 feature films and over 100 hours of television to his name, though the only thing on his filmography that I have seen is Dusk Till Dawn 3: The Hangman's Daughter. He appears as a movie set safety expert.
In your experience, have you worked and seen the interaction between prop masters and armorers?
I have.
And can you tell the jury, in your experience generally, how they interact? Who's in charge of the firearms and who's in charge of the ammunition, and then what the prop master role is?
Well, the prop master, more often than not, hires the armorer because that's a subset of that department. But the armorer is in charge of all ammunition, all firearms, maintaining them, keeping them safe, and inventorying the ammunition.
With those duties and responsibilities, would you believe it to be important in your experience to accord the armorer adequate time to do those duties?
Yes.
And would it be important to accord adequate resources for that armorer to do those duties?
Yes.
If there is a scenario where the armorer is dealing with a gun-heavy set, not having those resources, who would you expect to assist that armorer in getting those?
Props.
If there is a situation where there is a scene, a video, something's happening, and both the armorer and first assistant director witness a safety violation involving a weapon, for example, what would be your assessment whether one or both of them should say something about that?
I would say both of them should say something about it and figure out why it happened and make sure it doesn't happen again.
According to P.J. Pesh's trivia page on IMDb, he has studied quick draw and cowboy shooting for 15 years, with none other than Hannah Gutierrez's stepfather, Thel Reed.
Do I need to restate the question? Do you remember?
Yes,
okay.
please.
So my question for you is, we saw some interviews from Ms. Gutierrez, and she does explain that she was not in the church because she was preparing her fanny pack and her blank ammunition for the next scene. You agree that that's sounds like armor work to you, not props work.
Yes.
Okay. And are you also aware, sir, that on the morning of the 21st, when the crew was waiting for replacement camera personnel to arrive, Ms. Gutierrez had approximately 3 hours to work on her preparation for the scenes that day?
I was not aware of that.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Any redirect?
Just very briefly, Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. Petch, if there was a scene going on inside the church at that time involving Mr. Baldwin and the firearm, if Miss Gutierrez Reed was not in the church, would you have expected someone to have called her back in?
I would. If there's a firearm on set, there should be an armor on set.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
And with that, the defense rests.
The law presumes the defendant to be innocent unless and until you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt of her guilt, his or her guilt. The burden is always on the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not required that the state prove guilt beyond all possible doubt. The test is one of reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense, the kind of doubt that would make a reasonable person hesitate to act in the graver and more important affairs of life. You are the sole judges of the facts in this case. It is your duty to determine the facts from the evidence produced here in court. Your verdict should not be based on speculation, guess, or conjecture. Neither sympathy nor prejudice should influence your verdict. You are to apply the law as stated in these instructions to the facts as you find them, and in this way decide the case.
Special Prosecutor Carrie Morrissey, representing the state of New Mexico, made her closing argument first, lasting almost an hour.
We end exactly where we began, in the pursuit of justice for Halyna Hutchins. I want to start by just generally outlining Hannah Gutierrez failed to maintain firearm safety, making a fatal accident willful and foreseeable.
Defense attorney Jason Bowles, representing Hannah Gutierrez, made his closing argument second, running just under 45 minutes.
Let me tell you why there's reasonable doubt, number one, that they will never be able to rule out in this case. Sarah Zachary threw away rounds. She unquestionably threw away rounds after the shooting. It's undisputed. We have no idea what those look like. We will never have an idea what they look like, and that will never be able to be overcome.
Then there was a short rebuttal from Carrie Morrissey.
Hannah didn't know there was a live round on set. I agree. If Hannah knew there was a live round on set, and she loaded it into a prop gun, and it was used to kill Halyna Hutchins, she wouldn't be charged with involuntary manslaughter. She'd be charged with second-degree murder.
The jury deliberated for 2 hours.
I said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, through the foreperson, have you reached a verdict?
Yes.
All right, and do you wish to read the verdicts?
Sure.
Okay. I would start with count one. Okay. You heard both of them. Will the defendant please stand?
We find the defendant, Hannah Gutierrez, guilty of involuntary manslaughter as charged in count one. We find the defendant, Hannah Gutierrez, not guilty of tampering with evidence as charged in count two.
So that was the trial of Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armourer of Rust. I made this video because I think there's a very important lesson to learn from this trial, and that is safety should always come first. Because this video was edited down from close to 80 hours worth of courtroom footage, it has inevitably become a little soundbitey. If you would like to see the videos in full without edit, may I suggest the YouTube channel Court TV, where I source 90% of the material. I should point out that I have no legal training, and if there are any errors in the narration, I would like to acknowledge those mistakes to be my own, as are any opinions contained herein. Alec Baldwin will stand trial in July 2024. If you would like me to give that trial the same treatment as this one, please comment below. Thank you, and please stay safe. I'm Scott Kingsnorth, and I'm making a movie.